The date is Monday, February 10th. The time is 6:07 p.m., and we'll call this meeting of the Burlington City Council to order. The first item on our agenda is our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Litwin. Is there a second? Second by Councillor Bergman. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Second item on our agenda is we have two executive sessions. Before going into executive session, we'll make the necessary motions on both of these items, item 2.1 and item 2.2. The first item is item 2.1, an executive session for contract negotiations and related legal advice pertaining to an agreement with UVMMC. Councillor McKnight, could I turn to you for the first motion on that item?
Yep. I move that the council find that premature general public knowledge of information concerning contract negotiations of an agreement with UVMMC and related legal advice would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage with such negotiations.
Thank you, Councillor McKnight. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councillor Bergman. I will note that on this motion and any second motion, I am recused due to a professional conflict of interest and will not be in the room for the executive session on this topic. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Noting my recusal, that motion carries unanimously. Councillor McKnight, could I turn to you for a motion on motion 2?
Yes, thank you, President Travers. Based on that finding, I move that the council go into executive session to receive information regarding agreement negotiations with UVMMC and receive confidential attorney-client communications pursuant to 1 VSA 313A, 1A, and F.
Thank you, Councillor McKnight. Is there a second? Thank you, Councillor Bergman. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Noting my recusal again, that carries unanimously. Before heading downstairs for our executive session, we have item 2.2 on McNeil commercial items. Councillor McKnight, could I turn to you for a motion on the first item?
Yes, thank you. I move to find that premature general public knowledge of commercial real estate and contract negotiations between the Burlington Electric Department and private parties would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage in the negotiations because the city risks disclosing confidential information in public.
Thank you, Councillor McKnight. Is there a second? Thank you, Councillor Bergman. Any discussion on that motion? We will go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries unanimously. And Councillor McKnight, could I go to you for a motion on the second item?
Yes. Based on the finding of substantial disadvantage, I move that the committee enter into executive session under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A1A and 1 VSA 313A2 to include legal counsel, the city council, the mayor and her staff, the chief administrative officer and/or her departmental designees, and appropriate Burlington Electric Department staff.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bergman. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We are now in executive session on items 2.1 and 2.2. The council will move to the Busher Conference Room downstairs for that executive session. Yes, Councillor Bergman. Yes, the link should be in Councillor's emails. I'll text it to her. Yeah, I'll text it to her to come from the phone. Just so folks know, we will be taking item 2.2 first. Because I need to recuse myself from item 2.1, we'll take item 2.2 first. I will return as we enter into item 2.1. We have public forum set for a time certain of 6:45 p.m., and so we will be back no later than 6:45 p.m. Thank you. As the council gets back here to their seats, I will note that it is 6:52 p.m. We did have public forum scheduled for a time certain of 6:45 p.m., so I do want to turn to that as quickly as possible here. We will go ahead and now open public forum at 6:52 p.m. Under our council rules, we'll first hear from Burlington residents here in City Hall, and then among those Burlington residents online. We'll then repeat that process for any non-Burlington residents. As a reminder, in order to participate in our public forum online, you need to have signed up at least an hour in advance through the City Council's website. Each speaker, both here in person and online, will be provided 2 minutes. When I call your name, if you're here at City Hall, please come to the table. Make sure your microphone is on by hitting the push button. The green light should illuminate, and speak directly into the microphone. For those online, I will let you know once you've been unmuted, and I'll have an online timer up for you to see. When providing comments, please direct them to me as the chair and not to any other individual councilor. It is important that City Hall remain a safe place for those who serve, those in attendance, and those watching our meetings. The council respects and values the diversity of opinions and perspectives on public issues. We ask, however, that all comments please be free from individualized attacks, hate, harassment, obscenities, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on any protected characteristic. We also ask that public comment avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. If I interrupt a speaker at any point, it will be because I'm providing the speaker an opportunity to proceed under these rules as I've described them. If public comment continues in violation of these rules, I reserve the right at that point in time to end public comment for that speaker. We, at the moment, have 6 Burlington residents signed up for public forum. The first is Brett Yates, who will be followed by Andre Clark. Brett.
Hi. I'm here to draw attention to a particular line in the proposed resolution relating to the Housing Trust Fund, which says, many universities house their students all 4 years, but not UVM. There's no citation for this claim, and that's because the actual list of universities that house their students all 4 years is a list of small liberal arts colleges and military academies. There's not a single state in the country whose flagship university houses its students all 4 years. In fact, most of them house a smaller percentage of their students than UVM does. Yet the baseless notion that under normal circumstances, college juniors and seniors would live on campus seems to drive our elected officials' orientation toward Burlington's housing problem. We can't begin to correct the problem if our analysis of what went wrong isn't rooted in reality. I think that's partly why what we have tonight is not a proposal to take action, but a proposal to commission a study that maybe, possibly, will lead to action further down the line. I understand that commissioning a study can sometimes be an essential first step toward action, but I know it can also be a way to kick the can down the road. Honestly, there aren't that many different ways that municipalities raise money. Almost all of this, their secondary means of generating revenue are more regressive than the property tax. I don't think Burlington is getting a municipal income tax anytime soon, and councilors could probably research the other alternatives themselves. The irony of this resolution is that while it intends to support the creation of affordable housing principally for tenants, it structures itself transparently around the interests and fixations of existing homeowners. And it remains clear to me that homeowners are the only people who count politically in this town. Thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Our next speaker will be Andre Clark, to be followed by Jane McDougall.
Sir, did you leave? Oh, no, he did.
You want to go first, Jane?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. No. Hello, my name is Jay McDougall. I'm dealing with a sidewalk issue, and they are totally a disaster. I'm trying to get some help to fix them so people can get to be safer. I have some residents that are in wheelchairs named Will, Hope, and a few other people that are in Hope have walkers. I would like to get them fixed because this is 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Next speaker will be Andre Clark, to be followed by Amy Wright.
Hi, my name is Andre Clark, Ward 2. I am formerly unhoused and recently earned my master's in public health from UVM. I'm the founder of a local volunteer organization, Street Cats Burlington, that does street-level outreach and partners with local social service and mutual aid organizations to support our unhoused neighbors and friends. I'm here to express my dismay with this council's misguided focus on rebuilding the police department and eliminating the officer cap instead of focusing on the actual challenges our community is facing. We are not going to police our way out of the crises our city, our state, and our country are facing. It is unfortunate that our city councilors are using the guise of public safety to criminalize and further marginalize our unhoused neighbors and friends. I am begging you to focus on data-driven solutions that target the social determinants of health, like housing, food, social support, and employment. This is the way to reduce crime and ensure public safety for all of our neighbors, not just those who have a safe place to sleep. We have people dying in the streets, and our focus should be on keeping people alive and sheltered instead of arresting them or further stigmatizing them for simply existing. Our friends and neighbors living outside in dangerous cold temperatures should be our immediate focus, and we must bring a resolution forward that creates short and long-term housing, emergency shelter, and allows for sanctioned encampments until we have enough homes for our entire community. The city's current emergency shelter policy of -10 is inhumane, and I don't understand how you can sleep soundly at night knowing that people are living unsheltered in weather that you wouldn't stay outside for more than a few minutes. Most people in this room, me included, will go home after this meeting to the warmth and safety of our homes. Try to put yourself in the shoes of those who have nowhere to go, people who are openly harassed and mocked daily.
Thank you.
I do not have the strength to lose any more of
you.
our friends because you guys refuse to act.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Amy Wright, to be followed by Ali Schachter.
Thank you, Mr. President and council members. My name is Amy Wright. I live on North Street. In the 1980s, I served as CEDO's housing director, and over the last 40 years, I've worked in a variety of roles developing family and senior affordable housing. I urge you to support the Housing Trust and Fund resolution and to engage with the city's very talented CEDO office to find a way to increase its funding. In 1990, like now, the city resources were limited and affordability was a huge issue. Voters responded to a call to provide a penny for affordable housing to create the Burlington Housing Trust. In its first year, this fund was instrumental in creating 382 permanently affordable apartments, including the amazing Northgate community at the end of North Avenue. The trust was a catalyst for Macaulay Square on North Prospect Street, the Thelma Maple Co-op on Archibald Street, senior living at Cambrian Rise and Thayer Commons, and many other communities that Burlington counts on. From my experience as a former housing developer, I can say there are a lot of statistics about the impact of new affordable housing, but the biggest impact is really not a number. It's the relief that's felt when a household finds a stable home that they can afford. The affordable housing that the fund has created in the 1990s is still affordable today, and every year these properties continue to serve new households. An increased investment in the Housing Trust Fund is desperately needed given the urgent demand and much higher construction costs that we face today. Increased city support now will leverage state and federal funds and will pay off in decades in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Carter.
Our next speaker will be Ali Schachter, to be followed by Lee Morgan.
Hi there. I'm Ali Schachter, Ward 1 resident, and also a candidate for the East District City Council seat. I've been following the UVM Medical Center MOU process And I really commend the way that the community and the medical center have come together on this and the progress that's been made. In speaking with Ward 1 residents, it's also clear to me that there are continued concerns around building height limitations, lot coverage on protected areas, parking garage heights, and parking capacity. And I'm also aware that Ward 1 does not have full representation on City Council right now, given the vacancy in the East District seat. So to that end, I'm here tonight to advocate that the mayor and City Council consider delaying the vote on the UVM Medical Center MOU until the East District seat is filled. Since Ward 1 is the most heavily impacted ward in our city when it comes to this MOU, I feel strongly that we, Ward 1 residents, deserve full representation on the council when this is brought to a vote. And I also want to express my support for finding paths to more affordable housing in our community, whether that best path is with the Housing Trust Fund, like what's being considered tonight, or other means. I'm really grateful that this critical conversation is being brought forward.
Thank you. Our last Burlington resident here in City Hall is Lee Morgan. We'll then turn to Burlington residents online, and the first Burlington resident online will be Emma Wall-Curry.
Hello, Lee Morgan, Ward 3. Since we last met, something troubling has happened that I feel compelled to address. Just last week, a current Democratic city councilor used their online platform to incite dogpiling on anyone criticizing the Burlington Democrats. The official Burlington Democrats Instagram account then amplified that post. Unsurprisingly, the volume and intensity of harassment that I've been receiving increased immediately afterward. Now, to continue where I left off in my resignation letter. During the race for town meeting day, Redacted went even further, weaponizing my own family, staunch Democrats in their campaign. Supporters engaged in transphobia and subjected me to relentless attacks, including death threats, rape threats, and harassment that infiltrated every part of my life. In mid-December, just days after Democrats voted to strip the right to private action from the graffiti ordinance, a devastating blow to the trans community, a man accosted me outside my apartment and threatened to kill my dogs. After enduring 14 months of relentless harassment and experiences most will never experience in a lifetime, the bottom dropped out. I attempted suicide twice in 1 week. I am forever grateful for the mental health resources in Burlington, including the police and fire departments whose life-saving interventions helped me survive. Politics should not be like this. It should not drive people into suicide. Sadly, I am not unique. Since going public with my experiences, I've learned of 2 other survivors who attribute their suicide attempts to the Burlington Democratic Party. And I'll end there this week. I will be back at the next meeting. Thank you.
Our first Burlington resident online is Emma Wall-Curry. Emma, you should be able to unmute yourself. Hold on, I'm just going to share the timer on screen here. All right, go ahead, Emma.
Thank you. Emma Corey, Ward 6. First, I want to express solidarity with the members of our community with mobility issues that are struggling to navigate our sidewalks. Tonight, I'm here to ask our city leaders to urgently bring a resolution to address both the immediate and long-term needs of our unhoused neighbors. There's so much talk and concern about safety, yet we are all still focusing on Band-Aid solutions like policing and not addressing root cause with data-driven solutions. We will never be safe until our most vulnerable are safe. Our unhoused are a mirror of our society, and that can feel uncomfortable to process. Still, it is clear that we haven't understood that this problem is ours. It is not something out there that someone else needs to solve. Our unhoused neighbors are our community. Their problems are our problems. City leaders, please understand that when you block emergency shelter, you are sentencing human beings in our very own city to death. Would you camp out in a tent in -10 degrees? It is simply inhumane to expect anyone to do so. These are our neighbors who need support. No matter which political party you identify with, this administration has said that they want to approach issues by integrating all perspectives. This positions us like never before to set an incredible example of unity and progress in a multifaceted city. Please put your differences aside and unite to bring solutions for this precious group of Burlington residents. You have the power in your hands to improve the safety of Burlington to all. Our unhoused neighbors are just as deserving of that safety. For community listening today, show compassion and curiosity to our unhoused neighbors. Learn their names and stories. Don't allow yourself to become numb, afraid, or hardened. When they are cared for, we are all cared for. When our unhoused are protected, we are all protected. When they are safe, we are all safe. Please, city leaders, come together and bring a resolution to address both the immediate and long-term needs of our unhoused friends and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next Burlington resident online is Erhard Monkey, who will be followed by Sharon Busher. Erhard, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment on the Housing Trust Fund resolution before you tonight. For the record, I'm Erhard Manka, 60 Grove Street, Ward 1, longtime housing advocate and former U.S. Senate staffer. As you know, we're experiencing a protracted affordable housing crisis, a crisis that affects our lowest income residents the most. An estimated 250 plus people are sleeping unsheltered in our area after the mass unhousing from motels. 60% of Burlington's residents are renters, facing typical one-bedroom rents of $1,800 a month and two-bedroom rents of $2,300 a month. To be affordable, these rents require annual incomes of $72,000 a year and $92,000 a year, respectively. Meanwhile, the mean renter wage in our area is $19.61 an hour, or $41,000 a year, making $1,020 a month their maximum affordable rent. And the rent for someone living on SSI disability can afford only $300, a staggering $300 a month. The gap is huge. Our median sales price in 2024 was $530,000, and that would require an income of $177,000 a year and over $40,000 upfront for down payment and closing costs. As a founding member of what became Champlain Housing Trust, we recognized back in the 1980s that to make up for deep cuts to federal funding, we needed to dedicate city funds for housing to continue making Burlington affordable for working families, seniors, people with disabilities, and others living on low and moderate or fixed incomes. We face a similar situation now as Donald Trump and Elon Musk attempt to undermine the federal government from within and seek to slash funding for programs that everyday people rely on. Our CDBG and home dollars have remained stagnant for decades, and both the city's and state's federal COVID relief funds have run their course. Now is the time to look at further ways to increase city funding for affordable housing and for our nonprofit providers. Please support the resolution before you about the housing to increase funding for the Housing Trust Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erhard. Our next speaker will be Sharon Busher, and then our last Burlington resident online will be Carol Jaramillo. Sharon, you should be able to go ahead.
Thank you, President Travers. I want to speak to the UVMMC MOU. Just to reflect back, it was Chapin Spencer and I that served on the City Council when the first MOU came forward. Chapin, as a visionary with TDM, was instrumental in getting, working with CATMA and the hospital to get the plan that put in place a hospital expansion that didn't drown us with traffic jams and parking. I'm so appreciative of the work that he did. Now the hospital is looking to expand again and needs additional parking. I hope that as an employee, I worked there for 50 years. In 2019, employees had to be there for 25 years before you got on-site parking. I think that's instrumental to know who actually utilizes parking currently, how many employees versus how many physicians, visitors, and patients. I think that is the data that you need to right size the amount of parking that the hospital is anticipating they need. The McClure parking structure houses mainly residents, medical residents that serve patients. So I want people to look at that carefully. The second piece has to do with the McClure parking garage. That area on the other side of Mary Fletcher Drive, I'm hoping the hospital and the city will consider reducing the height, because that really does impact the neighborhood, and hope that the berm that is in place can soften any expansion on that side of Mary Fletcher Drive and maintain also the transitional buffer zone around Colchester Avenue and East Avenue. Thank you very much for considering my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Our last Burlington resident online will be Carol Jaramillo. We'll then return here to City Hall for Amy Demetrowitz. Carol, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I am the community builder at the Northgate Residents Ownership Corporation, and I'm here to talk about the resolution in front of you regarding the Housing Trust Fund. The Board of Directors wants you to know that we have never forgotten and have continual gratitude regarding the housing trust funds that were given to Northgate back in 1990. It helped defray the costs at that time for some rehabilitation for Northgate that was very, very much needed in a property that was allowed to really kind of rot from its original owner. We became the first resident-led nonprofit buyout of this type of expired use housing, and it's still resident-owned and led today. We applaud your efforts to seek funding, more resources for this housing trust fund, and we just want to say that we are forever grateful. It has helped so many people from 1990 through the present time. Northgate continues to be perpetually affordable, and it is flourishing, led by its residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now return here to City Hall. We have one non-Burlington resident here, and that's Amy Demetrowitz. And then we have one additional public forum speaker online, who will be Karen Sita, but Amy, we'll start with you. It doesn't sound like it's on. If it's not, the green light needs to be on the microphone itself.
Hi, I'm Amy Demetrowitz, the Chief Operating Officer of the Champlain Housing Trust. I'm here to speak in support of the resolution that aims to increase funding for the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund has been an essential tool in supporting the development of affordable housing in Burlington over the past 35 years. From the 28 resident-controlled apartments of the Flynn Avenue Housing Co-op built in the early 90s to the 38 apartments currently under construction at Post Apartments, the site of the old VFW. It's a great, impactful program that has helped us build or renovate over 600 apartments in Burlington. For example, at Cambrian Rise, trust funds were key to the development of Laurentide Apartments with 76 affordable apartments, and Juniper Apartments, a 70-unit senior housing project developed by Cathedral Square. We're now finalizing plans for 2 more buildings in Cambrian Rise, one with 40 affordable apartments and the other with 30 permanently affordable for-sale condominiums. These 2 buildings will be across the street from the recently completed condominium building that has homes for sale for $1.6 million. Our condos will have an average net price of $200,000, a price affordable to households earning less than 80% of median income, and they will be permanently affordable. There's no way we could move forward with building these affordable homes for sale without trust fund dollars. Increased funding for the Housing Trust Fund will help us replicate the success of Cambrian Rise in the South End Innovation District in partnership with the owners of the property on Lakeside Avenue. Housing trust funds will be critical to making this vision a reality. We applaud this resolution and the commitment to exploring new ways to expand this important resource. Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned, we have one additional speaker online, and that is Karen Sita. I will note wrong Karen is online. It should be Karen Sita. I will note that once we close public forum to councilors, we will be turning to our local control commission and local cannabis control board. Karen, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm going to share the timer now.
Okay, Mr. President, I just feel like I'm entitled to an extra 30 seconds, sorry, because last time I spoke, this council tried to play me and ruin my time. And I keep trying to tell this city as much as I can, especially in litigation, I'm not the one. So am I entitled to that? It is Black History Month, and I've been the blackest around here. You make me chuckle, Mr. President. Alrighty, great. Well, let me talk about the disgrace. Unfortunately, the city is once again not acknowledging Black people on Black History Month. You see the precedent that has been set that the first woman mayor of the biggest city in Vermont has yet to acknowledge Black people on Black History Month. But somehow, when it's election season, she finds all of these Black women and says, oh, vote for me, vote for me. And then these same, and again, if she was a Republican or if she was a male, there would be a bunch of Black women having an uproar, but somehow we're letting things slide with her, and I don't understand that. Again, I don't understand how come nobody's ancestor let you know that this one was playing you, because I can't be played by no woman, so I peeped out a long time ago, okay? And another thing, too, I want to make it very clear, because we talk a lot about DEI. Every time I speak, they like to look at me like I'm some sort of DEI hire. First of all, they can't hire me, honey. It's costly. Second of all, one, Sarah George, Charity Clark, that new mayor of yours, Becca Ballard, those are the DEI hires, okay? I just been the blackest, realest chick that they have ever seen in their entire lives. Period. Saying, how come you're not building housing? How come for 6 years when I was walking around Burlington looking too cute, looking too fine, saying, how come there's no new apartments? How come I'm not seeing construction boys? How come these men are not building new housing? They didn't want to listen to me. It's a disgrace. Again, you know, she was real uncomfortable when she saw me on MLK Day, but I was like, you're going to shake my Black hand, okay, in front of all these Black people during MLK's Black Day. Well, these Black people are singing these Black Negro, whatever they were singing. Praise the Lord. Anyways, I just think it's a disgrace. I think that we should check her just like all of us were ready to check Miro. Miro has a Black daughter that he looks at every day. So again, Black History Month, and I hope that for this agenda or her new whatever thing that she's about to say, because, you know, they let the mayor speak, that she's going to say, okay, yes, I failed you guys in not acknowledging Black history, but this is my time now, because we gave her a chance. And if we find out that it was wrong, we're going to take it back. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will now go ahead and close public forum at 7:20 p.m. We had scheduled our local control commission and local cannabis control meetings to happen at 7 and 7:15, so we will now briefly recess the city council meeting to turn to our local control commission meeting, which we will open up at 7:20 p.m. And for a motion on our local control commission agenda, I turn to the chair of our license committee, Commissioner Shannon.
Move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Grant. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have our agenda. The next item is our consent agenda. Commissioner Shannon, I turn to you for a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We have one deliberative item, and Commissioner Shannon, I would turn to you for a motion on item 3.1.
Move to approve the 2025-2026 first and third class liquor license application for Red Panda Kitchen and Bar at 161 Church Street with all standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Seeing no other business before the Local Control Commission, we will adjourn that meeting at 7:21 p.m. And we will begin our meeting as the Local Cannabis Control Commission. And for a motion on our agenda as this body, I will turn to you again, Commissioner Shannon.
Move to adopt the agenda with one amendment, which is 1.2, we'll call it, a brief update on the Cannabis Control Board. Second.
Okay. All in favor of that motion as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We now have an item 1.2 on the agenda, Commissioner Shannon, an update on the Local Cannabis Control Commission. I'm assuming that is your update.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to let this commission know that we had the attorney for the State Cannabis Control Board come to talk to us, and it was very informative. We have had questions about what exactly our authority is with regards to any kind of control over cannabis. That's what we're called. And the answers to that remain not very satisfactory, I would say. But there are some rules changes coming up that I wanted to just make people aware of, and they are having a hearing on February 20th. The State Board is having a hearing on February 20th. And the changes to their rules are available online. I can share some links if anybody is interested, but if you go to the Cannabis Control Board state website, you will find the proposals and invite anybody who wants to participate in that discussion to attend that public hearing. And certainly the mayor and administration may have something to say about that, and I'm happy to discuss that with you further. With that, I can move on to the consent agenda.
Yes, thank you.
I move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on that motion? We will go to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We only had a consent agenda on this item, so seeing no other business before the Local Cannabis Control Commission, we will adjourn that meeting at 7:24 p.m., and we will now resume our City Council meeting. We go back now to item 3 on our agenda, which is Mayor General City Affairs. And Mayor, on this item, I turn to you.
Thank you very much. And to change it up a little bit tonight, I'm going to invite one of my new colleagues, Teresa Vizina, to join me. And while she's making it to the table, because I want to introduce you to our new specialist on helping to implement the Overdose Prevention Center, Teresa, and I'll explain our little road trip we took in 2 parts during my update. But the first part, we were invited to attend the U.S. Conference of Mayors held a regional meeting in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'll go back to that in just a minute because there was things related to community safety I think are important to share. I can't see her through the camera, but Teresa joined because we also were able to tour their recently opened Overdose Prevention Center, and I really wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Teresa. And under this item on your agenda, you'll see a letter of interest document that we posted, a request for letters of interest for what will become our service providers for our OPC, which is all the work of Teresa. And I wanted to introduce her and give her a couple minutes just to explain where we are in our work so far. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. As the Mayor said, I'm Teresa Vizina. Just to give you a little background of who I am, I come from the nonprofit world. I've spent about 15 years at Vermont Cares as the executive director and held many roles there. So worked a lot within the syringe service program area. So moving into this role as the special assistant for the overdose prevention center implementation is really everything I've been working towards actually in all the years of my work. And I feel very committed to creating safer, healthier communities. And I do believe wholeheartedly in this project, and I'm really excited to bring my sense of community to this project. It is important, I believe, to engage the community. And so that's going to be one of the very first things that you'll see happening out of the mayor's office is a very strong emphasis on community engagement across all of our sectors, local providers and law enforcement and first responders, EMS, but also the community at large, both the people who use drugs and people who do not use drugs, people who are concerned. I think that we have to say that, this is very uncharted territory. And in this area, I think that we are a rural community. So although there's lots and lots of data-driven evidence out there about the positive impacts an overdose prevention center will have on saving lives, I think we are also recognizing that this community is going to be different from all the rest of them. So we'll build our own data and we'll build our own evidence-based outcomes. So I'm just really looking forward to being in this role and working alongside everybody here and so many more folks to get this project off the ground and save lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And so Teresa and I, well, the drive to Providence is rather long, I forgot that. And so we had 8 hours to really get to know each other quite well. And one of the things that I will forever remember from this experience is being able to tour the Providence OPC. They have other co-located services there that were quite powerful related to medical care and behavioral health care, as well as just general basic needs. Someone in public comment spoke to the social determinants of health. It's clearly a center that's really thoughtful around that. And they're breaking new ground in Providence, at least. And I know that we made a lot of really strong connections. They lit right up when they heard we were from Burlington, because we were there on a tour with other mayors. And that was also something that was affirming. Again, this was a convening primarily for New England mayors. And I was surprised how many went on the tour with us. That's a really encouraging sign to me that this is really seen as one tool, not the end-all tool, that many communities are finally at the point of understanding. And even in the room, because we also heard a full presentation before the tour for 22 mayors who were there with me. And it was a notable shift in the way that the conversation was going among elected leaders. There were community safety folks. There were multiple folks in the room. And I really think this affirms that Burlington is on the right path as we figure out our way to navigate this. So thank you for being here, Teresa. And again, the LOI that she posted while we were down there, because ever the overachiever, is there for the public as well as counselors to view. So I'm going to move on to my next items, but Teresa, feel free to sit there if you want or move. It's totally fine. So on to just community safety updates. I do appreciate the council giving us a little more time to prepare a more robust update for you on February 18th at your next council meeting next week. You'll hear more on the firm that we will select. A meeting this week with my chief of staff and our senior advisor on community safety to select the final firm that will lead our chief hiring process for our chief of police. That will include a high-level timeline of what we expect and hope when to bring a candidate on board with the help of that hiring firm. On Thursday, we're launching what would be a regular monthly press gaggle. That's a weird term out there, but it's a version of a press conference with a little more informality. They'll become a standing community safety update moment for our community. We've been strategizing how to best give updates on community safety, and we're going to try this out to convene press and to convene members of the administration to speak specifically to we'll try this out in 3 major areas. What police and fire are working on, how we're responding to public health, which is a third space I've identified as mayor as really needing to think across departments and figure out solutions for our community. And then the third area being general safety updates which would include things like our hotspot strategy that are cross-department efforts and strategies there. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be Thursday at 11:45, and we will hope to do these as standing monthly community updates through the press. On this week, I also have the really great privilege. This commissioner's name was brought up multiple times at this conference in Providence, but I'll be meeting with the commissioner, Charles Ramsey, who is retired, both large city police chief and now works with the Bloomberg Philanthropy Group to advise mayors on community safety in general. I met him first in Boston when I was at a new mayor's conference. He has been very generous to offer an hour of his time. I'm planning to cover a number of topics with him. But again, his remarks, you might recall, I mentioned in my update probably sometime in December. He has 50-plus years of experience between Chicago, D.C., and Philly, and I plan to cover hirings of tips on hiring police chiefs, things to look out for, his strategies and knowledge around peer cities facing similar dynamics as Burlington, recruitment strategies for police officers, and his more expansive comments he made at the conference on community safety, that it's larger than police. And I'll report back. And I've also want to just, that is what I'll mention on community safety. On the Providence conference, I just want to note that there was members of the Boston administration there, and I wanted to call out these sessions we had in general were on gun violence, officer training opportunities who are on command staff or hoping to become command staff within their police departments, overdose prevention strategies, as we just discussed. Police recruitment and retention was a topic, and the city of Boston sent the chief of staff for the Commissioner of Public Safety, which is their governmental structure there. And her comments in particular, I found very helpful and impactful, and in terms of strategies to try to use here in Burlington. She spoke a lot about the need, and I think we're already doing this, but moving out of a passive recruitment strategy and moving into pieces of recruitment work that engage the full department, every single person who works for the department, that develop intentional partnerships with the community that are built upon trust. And they found that their most successful recruitment strategies, especially to diversify their police departments to reflect the real faces of people who live in the community, came from those partnerships, which take time and intentionality to make sure that the folks are welcoming and trusting to help with the recruitment efforts. And then also intentional mentorships for folks who join the department who are members of underrepresented parts of our community. So they spoke a lot to the women who join the force, for example, and intentional mentorships that helps with the retention side of things once folks get into the department. Another speaker also spoke of something I hope to look into at the University of Chicago Crime Lab. There is a training for officers who are mid-career who are interested in command staff positions, free. And all the mayors perked up when the word free was mentioned. But it is a research-based program that sounds like has a lot of promising outcomes for officers who go and then become command staff, deputy chiefs, et cetera, in their departments. It was very well worthwhile, and I appreciate Mayor Smiley, who is the mayor of Providence, hosting this and being so generous with offering up his resources and city to host us. And then a couple just brief updates to keep track of other items the administration is working on. We commenced bargaining with our police union, which is the BPOA, and we commenced bargaining this week with BFFA, which is our fire union. We really have a great team, and things are off to hopefully an efficient start. I really do hope to bring bargaining to an agreeable place by the end of the fiscal year, because that's when our contracts expire. And as someone who used to work in the labor movement, that is a good faith effort and commitment from this administration to work diligently towards resolution for fair contracts and fair bargaining. And hopefully that timeline is something we can stick to. The CIO and I are spending lots of quality time yet again on fiscal year 26 budget. We presented earlier in January to the Board of Finance, and we've taken back and sharpened pencils to dive deeper into the budget. I'll be convening my budget advisors from last year this week to help go through some initial ideas we have to continue to work on the structural budget gap that we are facing for fiscal year 26 to get their input and advice. The CAO and many members of her team have helped me design a program and service inventory effort, which has not been done in the city before, to dive deeply into what we actually offer by department. This is a different budgeting strategy so that we can really look at what are we offering? Is it required by ordinance? Is it required by charter? What was the origin of this service or program? Is it serving the city today? There's many other elements of it as well. And it's been very helpful. I'm halfway through it. It is very long, but I'm halfway through it to really help understand what pieces do we need to look at in that concept of right-sizing our government to make sure we're on a sustainable path and not continuing services that are not part of our core services. We will never get to a place of affordability and sustainability for our city budget if we don't do this deeper work and come up with recommendations on things that should be let go, because we want to be responsible about our limited resources and really resource the things that have the most impact and particularly impact residents who have either are low income or won't be able to receive those services any other way. So look for that work hopefully in March or early April from us. Three final very quick things, sort of PSAs. We've heard from Central District to move the mayor meetup, and that will start now the second Tuesday of every month. That will be tomorrow. We've moved the time a little bit later. It'll be 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, February 11th. And this is the mayor meetup. We offer free childcare, so please come. We push it a little bit later beyond work hours for most people, but not all. But we hope folks will take advantage of that regardless of where you live in the city. That's the second Tuesday of every month. I want to give a big warm thank you to Matt Dow, who gave myself and my team a tour of the wastewater treatment plant on the waterfront in very cold conditions. He must be made of steel, because I nearly froze to death outside talking about lots of pools of water, doing all sorts of things to treat our wastewater system. But it was very eye-opening, and I really encourage folks, especially voters, to please take a look at the tour that was filmed by our partners at Town Meeting TV. or just take a tour yourself. We'll have at least one more left in February, maybe two. It's a really different way to understand why we're asking for bond support that we have put before voters on the ballot. And also a big warm thank you to one of the most skilled snowplow drivers I've ever had a chance to meet. I haven't met a lot of them, to be honest, but Lorand from DPW was happy to bring me along for a snowplow ride. I have to say, considering how much construction is happening in the city, the skill of our Department of Public Works staff in particular is impressive. The way they don't even have to look at the guide bars on the plows, it's something I hope all councilors take advantage of. It's a different when you see the city at work, literally right alongside the frontline workers. So I encourage folks to take advantage of a snowplow ride. There's a few more storms to come, so be in touch with Chapin, I'm sure. And then finally, a PSA on voting. Town meeting day is right around the corner. We do mail ballots to all registered voters in the city of Burlington. They should come out this week around February 12th, which is Wednesday. On local matters, all residents who are here with legal status can vote. You can find out information on how to register, regardless of whether you're a citizen or non-citizen, on our website. We have translated information there as well. And then finally, a bond hearing, which I'm sure the president will mention, will be held on Wednesday, February 12th, to hear even more about our 3 bonds we have on the ballot. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, which is City Council General City Affairs, to include climate and public health and safety emergency updates. Councilor Shannon, you wish to be recognized on this item.
Yes, thank you, President Travers. I know I'm supposed to address you, but Mayor, 22 years, nobody's invited me on a snowplow before. So I really hope to take advantage of that. Time is short. I wanted to just mention that Councilor Grant and I actually have been participating in the Community Academy, which is a program put on by the police department for not just city councilors, really, primarily for members of the community that would like to better understand what the police department does. And I have found it really interesting. Certainly, I have a depth of knowledge as a city councilor, of course, about what is going on in that department, but it is really helpful to sit in these meetings and focus on all the different aspects of our police department, including the community service officers, the community support liaisons, the dispatchers, the detectives, and to understand what each is doing. And to share the good news with you, I think that this is a department that has such great pride in the work that they're doing, all of them. You know, as we have struggled to hire throughout the city, really, and including the police department, and not just the sworn officers. But this is the work going on in this department does feed people's souls. They feel that they are doing very important community work, and they are. And I am very grateful to all of them. It's been wonderful to get more in-depth knowledge about, you know, recently we learned about what all the detectives do, how they approach their work, as well as use of force and the techniques that they use that are, you know, kind of wrestling moves that are intended to secure somebody without hurting them. And yeah, I have really found it moving to get to know different individuals and to learn more about the work that is being done. And that is available to all community members. It's put on once a year, and it's 3 Wednesdays in a row for 3 hours for 6 weeks.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on General City Affairs? Councilor Bergman.
We have, over the past, I think actually year, honored people in our community who have done some amazing things and who have passed on. And I will, or we will, hear more and talk more about it. But I was informed today that a very, very close friend of mine, Sandy Baird, died last night. And I've known Sandy since she worked at Legal Aid as a paralegal, and I worked as a housing advocate for People Acting for Change together in 1973. And we have had the type of relationship that if anybody who's known Sandy knows you can have. And I have had that for, what is this now, 50 years? 52 years. And it is quite sad. We will talk more about the contributions that Sandy Baird has, and up until probably yesterday, contributed to this community. But I think that it's important that I mention the loss of our deep and dear friend, Sandy. God bless.
Thank you very much, Councilor Bergman. I greatly appreciate you raising that. I was saddened and shocked to hear that news earlier today as well, and do believe this council will find a way to appropriately honor Sandy's service to our community in so many ways. So thank you for taking the time to mention that. Are there any other councilors that wish to be recognized in general city affairs? Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I know I sound like a broken record, but I think and I hope that we'll be closer, and we have a work session coming up to putting together, once again, a strategic plan for retention as well as recruitment. As I continue to go through the BPOA comments, I'm still reading them and I'm still sorting them and prioritizing. It is clear from our officers that one comment actually said that it doesn't seem like recruitment's being treated as a real emergency, and there were several comments about the lack of focus on retention. Many of us on the council had an opportunity to go to the swearing in ceremony that occurred recently. I appreciate the department giving us more advance notice. That was very helpful for me to be able to get time off of work to attend. We had a number of professional positions, I believe 9 or 10 of them. This included 3 CSOs, community service officers, a new command assistant, I believe 2 community support liaisons, a new cares clinician, a records clerk, a dispatcher, and I think a couple of more positions, but only 1 recruit for the academy. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I'll have some more comments during the work session, but we really have to think about the level of communication and community engagement that needs to be done, especially if we really want and truly desire to reach out to different groups of people in our city to engage them in a way that would make them be interested in working as a police officer. And we have not done that work. So there continue to be ideas about that, and we just have to bring them to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Grant. Councilor Litwin.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Grant, because that'll speed up my comments. A lot of that was the same, and it was nice to see you there at the swearing-in. I would echo all of her sentiments for the most part, and thank her for bringing up the need for a recommitment and a strong commitment to recruitment. I wanted to thank Chief Murad for his really stellar ceremony and how graciously he welcomed everybody to the staff, both the professional staff as well as the 1 recruit, hopefully soon to be Officer Wang Pai Boon. And what really stood out to me were 2 quick things. One is CAPE, Crisis Advocacy Intervention Programs, I believe, is now fully staffed which we should certainly celebrate. That is a huge investment that the people of Burlington have made on behalf of community-based policing models. And the second piece I would add is that Taiwan Paibun, who seems very excited to join us from Florida, you know, he has a long road ahead of him, and it really was helpful for me to see what that road looks like, and why recruitment of all angles is so critical. So the runway needed is roughly 1.5 years from just meeting him in the first place to going through the interview process, getting an academy date, which is then 4 months and has a 50% completion rate. And then after that, if he makes it through, which I hope and think he will have 580 hours to complete riding along with a more senior officer. So when we talk about why policing and raising the cap and making sure that we are sending clear messages that we support our police department matter, it's so that we can attract more than one person for this, and we can get folks into queue as quickly as possible. And I would just reserve the rest of my remarks there for our work session, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And I also just wanted to thank Airport Director Nick Longo and his amazing staff for welcoming me to the airport last week, so that I could better understand some of the operational questions around safety, and I was very impressed with their staff and how much they deal with, and they are particularly dealing with a lot as a result of the change of federal administration, and how that will impact our airport, I think will just continue to unfold for the next however long. So keep them in your thoughts. Be nice to everybody at the airport when you're there. And I just wanted to thank them for their graciousness, their experience, and the time that they gave me.
Thank you, Councillor Litwin. Is there any other councillor that wishes to be recognized on general city affairs? Okay. Seeing none, we will then turn to 2 work sessions that we have planned for this evening. The first is item 6.1, work session regarding data-driven community safety, rebuilding the BPD. And on this item, I know we have from the Office of City Planning, Nancy Stetson. But Mayor, did you want to introduce this topic?
Ever so briefly, I just want to welcome Nancy and just give you a little context of, these were, I can't even remember what council meeting we were hoping to originally have Nancy at, but this is an effort to make sure that we share some of her great and her team's great analysis work that they do on a number of critical data points related to our police department and the workload, and just some trends we've seen over the last several years. She did either a similar or almost the same presentation to a Bloomberg What Works Cities effort that we have been long in the application process for, and we'll have more news on that, what that is in a few more weeks. But it was such an impactful presentation. I thought that the council could really benefit from seeing this work and being able to ask some questions on what our own data tells us around what's happening in Burlington, the incidents, the workload, the staffing. So with that, Nancy, thank you for being here.
Great, thanks. I have a presentation, and I'm on the Zoom.
Make sure your mic is on or closer to you first, and Catherine's got you, I think, with the presentation, or is about to, or not. We will get there.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me. Thank you for making time on your agenda for this.
There you go, Nancy.
I have a couple notes before I jump into the data of this presentation. First, I want to give a big thank you to our city data analyst, Jeff Nicholson, who couldn't be here today, but he has done a ton of work to make this presentation possible. And he started just in August and has been thrown into the deep end of this work and has done a great job. And it's a huge boon to the city. So thank you, Jeff. All right, let me actually start by sharing my screen. The other point I wanted to make, sorry, 1 second. The other point I wanted to make here is that this presentation is split into two parts. It's split into recruitment and incident response. And if you may have already noticed, the recruitment side of this presentation is a bit slim. That is not a reflection on the importance of recruitment and retention to the police department. It's more of a reflection of just the richness of the data we currently have available around recruitment. And so this presentation and this work is really a starting point to what we'd like to build out over time, especially around recruitment, which I'll talk about more, is figuring out ways to track and understand what efforts are working around police recruitment. Can we see what's successful? And more generally, this whole presentation it's a starting point for how we'd like to track some of these issues going forward. So to get started, this slide just has some information that you are all already aware of about the history of the police department, starting in the 2020 with the hiring freeze. Over the next year, 22 officers resigned. The priority response plan was implemented. Eventually, the hiring cap was lifted to 87. The department was able to start hiring again, and the department started building out the community support liaisons, or CSLs, or CAPE, or CARES. There's a lot of acronyms there, and the CSO programs. And then the officer cap was lifted last January. But generally, what this presentation, what this data work is trying to understand is how do we go about rebuilding a police department that can respond to all requests for service without stretching our officers too thin to the point where they're overburdened. So that's how this presentation was shaped. To start, we'll look at the recruitment data that is available. This chart here shows the number of sworn officers employed by the department. This is likely familiar data to all of you if you've seen Chief Murad's reports. It shows that sharp decline over 2020 and 2021 to a low point of 61 officers in the summer of 2022. Since 2022, the department has been able to hire more officers, but officers have left at about the same pace, leaving us with a net of 2 officers as of right now. Over that 2-year span. So what I did to illustrate the problem that we're in is that if we continue at that pace of hiring officers, we won't reach this target of 84 sworn officers for another 10 years. There are error bars around this to just try to emphasize that it's not exact, it's not a prediction. And what we want to be able to do is to bend that curve and to increase that rate of hiring and slow down retention so that we can get there much faster. But this is what we're on track to be right now. So some of the data we have on recruiting so far are just the number of applications that have come in each month. So this chart looks at applications per month for police officer, which is the dark line on top, and CSOs. It also has a line for the monthly average of applications per position for any city job, which is right around 5 applications a month. So you see that in 2022 and 2023, we've received more police officer applications than CSO and other city positions. But that number did drop over time, and we do expect and want those applications to have more because the qualifications for being a police officer are higher than for being a CSO, so we need a bigger pool. As I said, we have limited data on recruiting right now, but I hope to be able to track over time as we start to implement some new strategies around policing or around recruiting to get a better sense of whether they work and if we can really isolate what works in recruiting more police officers. So moving on to incident response. I first want to just define what a police incident is. So an incident is it's a measure of police activity. So it can include both crimes like a single assault or a single burglary, but it also includes things that are not crimes like traffic stops, welfare checks, etc. So the first chart here shows the number of incidents that the police department recorded each year. Incidents fell through 2021 it's sort of during the middle of the pandemic. It had the least demand on police services. But then we've seen a pretty steady rise through 2023, and 2024 was largely sort of in line with 2023. Second, let me make sure I'm not missing anything. So what we can do with this data is we can break apart the data that we see here into who is actually responding to these incidents. Because unlike pre-2020, we now have other resources to respond to police incidents beyond sworn officers. So this slide shows incidents and who responded to them. The gray are incidents that were online only. The yellow, the next bar down, shows incidents that CAPE or Street Outreach responded to on their own. Likewise, the green are when CSOs responded on their own. The different shades of blue, the largest blue bar shows where sworn officers respond. Sometimes they respond with CSOs. And then the red at the bottom are incidents that were marked as stacked no response. So combined, 61% of incidents in 2024 were responded to by a sworn officer. 24% were responded by CSOs or CSLs on their own. And then 15% of incidents that were recorded by the police department did not receive a response. Because we're interested in, particularly interested in the demand on sworn officers, we can look just at incidents where a sworn officer responds. And this shows a slightly different trend, where 2022 was actually the year with the fewest incidents with a sworn response. It also shows that 2023 and 2024, again, were quite similar years. They're quite a bit lower than what we saw in the pre-pandemic time. Incidents in 2024 were 30% lower than in 2018. We can look in a slightly more granular way at this data by looking specifically not just at incidents that sworn officers respond to, but actually how many responses how often officers responded. So any one incident can have multiple officers respond, and some incidents have, a dozen officers respond. So this chart pairs the total number of sworn officer responses with the sort of matching chart of the number of sworn officers each year at the police department. So one thing to note here with the sworn responses is there is this sharp uptick in responses between 2022 and 2023, which I don't have actually a super clear. I think there's a couple different things happening there, but I think it may have contributed to sort of a perception of the demand for their services. But if you combine these two charts together, what you can get at is an overall average for the number of responses that sworn officers go to each year. So here again, there's a sharp uptick between 2022 and 2023. And 2023 had the highest average number of officer responses per officer that we had seen in any prior year, but it's not substantially higher than other busy years like 2015 and 2016. It's in a similar sort of realm of responses. But this is looking at the data spread across all officers, and that's not actually how the department is organized, and so what we looked at was how incidents were distributed across officers, because some officers are not expected to respond to lots of incidents at once or over the year. So this chart might take a little explanation. This chart groups officers into three buckets. So the dark purple shows the number of officers who responded to more than 1,000 incidents in a given year. The paler purple are officers that responded to 300 to 1,000 incidents, and the beige are officers that responded to fewer than 300. So when you look across time, what you see is that there's not a particular change in this distribution. Generally around 20% of officers respond to more than 1,000 incidents each year. these are likely the sort of patrol officers that are expected to go, day to day to incidents, versus the officers in the beige section may be deputy chiefs or detectives that are not sort of responding in the same way day to incidents. Finally, the last way we looked at this data was to focus in on the priority 1 incidents, which are incidents that are generally the most urgent, the most intense incidents that officers respond to. And here we do see a historical change compared to past years, where officers are expected to respond. Again, this is on average, so across all the officers, they respond to more priority 1 incidents than they had in the past. Again, we looked at this broken down across officers. And again, when you look at the distribution of these priority 1 responses across officers, you see that it's quite unusual compared to past years that officers, no one officer responded to more than 200 priority 1 incidents before 2020, and now around 20% of officers are sort of frequently responding to these high intensity incidents. When I put all this together, what I see is that the officers are not, the total volume of incidents that they're responding to is not particularly unusual from what we've seen in past years, but they're more likely when they respond to an incident for it to be a more intense incident than they would have gone to in the past. And so I think this is important to keep in mind as we move forward in trying to devise solutions to face the challenges that the police department is facing right now. That's my last slide. I'm happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Nancy. Any councilors have questions or feedback on this? Councilor Litwin.
Thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you pulling these slides together. They're really exciting to look at, and I shared them with constituents yesterday, trying to get them to look at these I know PowerPoint slides are not riveting for all, but I think they're really important, and I also want to thank the mayor for kind of commissioning this, if you will. And so just a couple quick comments that I took that I think you also alluded to some of. One is I would really love to see an analysis on the of the data on the police application spikes and drops. And really, I'd like us to better understand what caused the upticks and what caused the downticks. It almost actually was surprising to me to see some of those. And so one thing I started to ask was, where's the source of those applications? How did you learn about us? And I know Councilor Grant often talks about this as well. So thank you for that, Councilor Grant. And then if we can dig into that more, I think would be more revealing about what that long-term strategy that Councilor Grant is also talking about could look like in a lot of ways. So just more of a comment. Secondly, I did notice that the stacked is increasing each year, and I was curious if that is because our sworn officer count is decreasing, or are there other factors that you have kind of keyed into that might be informing that? I'd just like to better understand, maybe as a layperson, what might be causing that increase in stacked factors. Just one second, and then I'll open the floor to you, and I won't speak anymore. And then the last thing is, I'd really like to tease out the sharp uptick from 2022 to 2023 that you very obviously pointed out. And I think comparing that to 2015 is tougher, because it's like, what was 2015? It feels like the before times, a very different time. And so I think our goal is always to exponentially reduce crime. And so I think we have some understanding of what types of crime has gone up, what are the driving factors, both social determinants of health factors and other factors that are occurring in the community. And I think we and other community partners are addressing those.
as best we can, but I'd be curious to sort of tease that out over time. And please feel free to respond to anything, and I'm done now.
Okay, I think I have all of those. One point I'll make that a big difference between 2015 and 22 or 23 is that the police department used to do around 5,000 to 6,000 traffic stops a year, and now I think last year maybe they did 1,000. So that makes a huge difference in sort of their work and what they're expected to do.
Nancy, I'm sorry. Could you move the microphone a little bit closer to you?
Should I repeat
Or move
that?
yourself closer to the microphone?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And then your next question was on why stacked calls are increasing. And I don't have a set answer. I will say all of this work is based on what is put into the Valcor system. And so that label of stacked no response is fairly new. It was invented in 2022, I believe. And so it's possible it just, they got more practiced at using it. There's other ways they can stack calls that are not included in that. So I'm not sure exactly if it's a signal of something of more problems, or if it's more a data point there. Was there one more question?
It may not be a question, but just wanting to tease out that sharp uptick that you pointed out as well, which was the 22, 23 uptick. Even with averaging, which you did on the following slide, I think the public will see that and rightfully so ask, what's going on there? So this is our first conversation, hopefully of many, and I'm excited to hear about the press gaggle, but anyway, thank you.
Noted.
Any other counselors wish to be recognized on this work session? Councilor Grant?
Thank you. I really appreciate this data. We've seen some similar before, and I have dreams, especially now that we have Jeff. I know that was a big issue, having that position not filled for some time. I've had a lot of issues with, denial of request with regards to receiving data like this, not from you, but from, unfortunately, BPD leadership. So I really want to have a meeting with you and Jeff and really just sit down and talk about what is more useful data for the Public Safety Committee in 2024, maybe start to talk about some of the things that we can start to get access to that we've never been able to get updated in the current chief's report. So with the new leadership, maybe we can look at providing different and, in a lot of cases, more complete reports. With regards to more stacked, that became an issue, just as a FYI for fellow counselors, as the drug crisis got worse. And we saw accompanying crimes of, the increase in larcenies, the increase in overdoses, the increase in stolen cars is all related to how quickly the drug crisis was allowed to get out of control here. I will also say that with regard to the traffic stops, those went down because we didn't put something in place to address the biases that were associated with the stops. We didn't look so good, and we didn't want to do anything about it. I appreciate the numbers that you sent me around the recruitment, because they vary differently from the information that we received from the recruitment team. So I got your feedback about how some of the numbers that were included didn't actually get to them because they were filtered out by human resources. I would like to say to the mayor and to you and Jeff, we want to get really granular with what's coming in. I want to know why something got filtered out. I'm not saying things aren't getting filtered out for valid reasons. I'm saying that because this is such an important issue, that we really need to be tracking it. And if we're filtering out people that are, their application was driven to us through a particular way, that would help us fine tune how we recruit, because we still need to do this strategic, online digital advertising that we just have not done to get to a better place. And I have some other things that I will just probably email you. I've invited the current recruitment team to attend a public safety committee meeting so we can meet them and confirm with them if they're tracking their applications the same way that Corporal Irwin had been, because she had a very interesting and very informative graph with regards to how once they got those applications, what it was taking to kind of all the levels that people had to go through in order to go through the process and where we were losing people. So if somehow we can include them in the conversation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on this item? Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the site on priority 1 incidents, and because I didn't really understand what the stacked no response removed, what those numbers meant and how that fits in.
Do you mean this chart in the appendix, or was it in the?
Yeah, that is the slide. I can't hear you when you're not in the microphone. Sorry.
I was. So what this chart shows is it shows the priority 1 incidents, total volume. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
The total volume of priority 1 incidents. But then the dotted line is just taking out incidents that did not actually receive a response. And most priority 1 incidents do receive a response, but overdoses are counted as priority 1 incidents. They are primarily responded to by the fire department, especially in 2024. And so the trend of, it's sort of looking at 2 different ways to measure that demand on police services, where if you're including overdoses that they're not responding to, that line becomes more concerning.
So let me just understand the numbers. In 2022, if we just look at that one, well, actually, we don't have a number for that. I think 2023, we have an actual number for that one. It's in the stacked no response removed, you have 2,615.
Yes.
And then 2,809 were responded to?
Wait. Total priority 1s were 2,809. If you take out the ones that were not responded to, that were stacked no response, then you have a total of 2,615. They don't add together.
Okay, so the difference between the 2,615 and the 2,809, that's what was not responded to. So that line doesn't represent what was not responded to. It represents what was responded to.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. And prior, so you have a stacked response starting in 2021. And prior to that, there's no stacked response because we didn't stack responses prior to that, correct?
Yes, and we only took out the ones that say stacked no response, which is a particular category within stacked. It's just difficult otherwise to tell whether something was eventually responded to or not otherwise.
Okay, but the reason that the stacked responses start in 2021 isn't simply because we got that category in Valcorp. We weren't stacking responses prior to that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilor wish to be recognized? Councilor McKnight. and then Councilor Bergman.
Thank you for this really thorough presentation. Attention to detail is just impressive, and you clearly know the numbers back and forth. I think that these charts are something that we should really be coming back to over and over as time goes on, and making sure that we can measure our success or lack thereof. What struck me here is, on page 2, we have this very important question of how do we rebuild the police department? And what I'd love to spend some time, if we can, touching on in this work session is, and I think this is probably not necessarily a question for you, but perhaps if the administration is open to commenting on this, what do we do with these charts? What are the action plans that we are going to take? Because, if our goal is to make data-based decisions, I'm not seeing the decision-making part here, which is really the most important part of our ability to change the trajectory of the charts. And so earlier, the mayor listed what sounded like some exciting potential actions from the conference in Rhode Island. I'm curious to hear if there's thoughts on whether this data confirms or sort of denies that any of those would be, smart paths to pursue. Chief Murad provided several different potential recruitment proposals in the report he gave us in December. So does this analysis support following any of those proposals or not? I think, to me, we really just need to have that conversation and start seeing that action plan. And then, as I mentioned at first, continue to come back to these charts, because it's really in that action and the decision step that we make real progress. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Councilor Bergman?
Just one question. Thank you, Nancy, for this report. Are the incidents that are reported online counted in the stacked number?
Online incidents are not generally counted in the stacked number. We were just looking into this today. Often they do not get a response. So the majority of incidents that are reported online are used as sort of a way to report something to the police, but they do not get a follow-up response from that.
Okay. So I can see that Councilor Grant, who is involved in the granularity of these things, would love to pipe in. Council President Travers, could I cede my time to her in this for a follow-up question on that? That'd be most effective and efficient.
Well, Councilor Grant still had 30 seconds on her time, so perhaps if we could try to keep it to that. Councilor Grant?
Thank you. I will say that we've been trying to get the department to do digital advertising and targeted social media, and we failed. There's nothing. So we've got to get it through our heads that we need that. That is the number one suggestion across all, like, recruitment material. It is the number one thing, and we have not done it. So we have to start there. Where are those online incidents? Like, where are we tracking those? Thank you.
That is one of those questions that has a simple answer, and then there's the intricacies of the data system. It's not so simple. Online incidents are posted online with the other incident data that Jeff posts monthly. You can filter them out by looking at, I believe the field is called call origin, and it's labeled there. Jeff can also find them based on, there's an officer code that's the online officer, it's not an actual officer. And so he can filter them out using that.
So they're not in your data because they're not in Valcor?
No, they are. They're in Valcor. They're in Valcor. They're in our online open data. You can find them there.
I'm sorry, Councilor Grant. We're well over 5 minutes now with your time.
But I
so-
think this would be, if I may be allowed some latitude, because I think this would be interesting to everyone to have a understanding, especially with regards to the number of complaints that we've gotten from our businesses about.
If you could ask one other question, Councilor Grant, we're over time on the topic, and we're over time. So
I'm just trying to have, we've had these issues with the non-responses to online incidents. Is there, I guess my concern is, are we in fact at this time fully tracking them? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's probably a question best for the police department. We see what is tracked in Valcor, and we do publish that data on an incident level.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Bergman, the floor is still yours if you want it back. Okay. All right. We are over time on this topic, but was there any other councilor that wished to
Point of
get in the
inquiry.
queue? Yes, Councilor Lehman?
Councilor McKnight posed questions prior to the extra time given to the administration, and I didn't know if the administration cared to respond.
Okay. Well, Mayor, did you want the floor in response to that? I did sort of see you potentially interested in the microphone there.
I'm happy to be very brief, but I think this is going to take, my answer was going to be I need to get back to you because there are a number of, first of all, this was not presented in such a way to overlay with any recruitment strategies. This was sort of a backwards looking analysis to tell you our trends. So I'm not going to do that on the fly. What I will tell you out of the gate, though, is that there are a number of recruitment strategies that I have not seen an assessment to that can overlay easily on this. For example, I'm sure, I'm not the data person, but I'm sure there's not an easy way to crisscross a recruitment strategy and then knowing down to the year, down to the month around how effective it was or not, because that has not really been done adequately by the Burlington Police Department. That is what I want to change. And so I think going forward, that will be my expectation, because I think you all can make better decisions, as can I. When we try a strategy, we evaluate it and we measure it with coordination with our data team about how effective it was, and that hasn't been done yet.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other councilor that wishes to get in the queue on this item? Since this is a work session, I will just say one item. Nancy, thank you very much for this data. First of all, if folks do want to access the data to sort of cut it themselves and take a look at it, can you just remind folks where they can go? Because I think there's a pretty great portal that I know that you're very involved with here that I want to highlight.
Thanks. Yes, data.burlington.gov has lots of different data sets, lots of different dashboards. So you can download the police data itself, but you can also, there's pre-built dashboards. It also has housing data and financial data as well.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. And I suppose just the last thing I'll say is this. At the Board of Finance meeting we had earlier, there were a number of downtown business leaders who came here to speak to really serious concerns that they still have about the state of public safety, particularly in our downtown space. And I know that the data tells us a certain important picture here, but I do think that if you went to most folks in Burlington to ask, is the public safety picture today in alignment with the public safety picture that we saw 10 years ago, they would tell you no. So when we make these sort of data-based, evidence-based decisions, yes, the numbers are one thing, but there's also a lot of evidence to gain from our downtown business owners, from our residents here, from our visitors to downtown, and that's not necessarily captured in the numbers. So as we move forward here, I do think it's certainly critical to remain mindful of the numbers here, but also we continue to hear from folks that because of the current responsiveness rate of our police department, they don't call the police any longer, right? And you can't capture those numbers either. So I think it's critical that we remain mindful of that as we, to Councilor McKnight's point here, continue to build the plans from here. We'll look forward to continuing to see the data, but also to continuing to hear the data from the own voices of our residents and business owners and visitors here in Burlington. I don't know if there's anything further that you have, Nancy, but this has been an informative topic.
Well said. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next work session, and thank you, Pablo and Christian, for your patience here, is item 6.2, a report of the City of Burlington Reparations Taskforce. I know we have the chair from a Reparations Taskforce, Pablo Bose, here. We have our interim director of REIB, Christian Berry, as well. But Pablo, you are here at the table. We do have our report from the Reparations Taskforce. I will note that we also have your individual recommendations. And so thank you very much for sharing that information. And at the outset, Pablo, let me say, incredibly grateful for your work on this task force, and appreciate your taking the time to be here with us this evening.
Thank you. You may have also seen, so I'm here as the chair of the task force. There are two other members currently active on the task force, Christine Hughes and Roy Hill, neither of whom are here. I'm not here representing them. I'm here to deliver this report. You will, I believe, all have received an email from Mark Hughes outlining the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance's own recommendations. So what I'll do very briefly here is just quickly summarize the charge and the work of the task force, and then I'll go through some of the recommendations that I have, and then I'll leave it to you to also take a look at the recommendations that Mark Hughes has sent to you as well.
Pablo, just before you start, sorry, you have to get these mics sort of awkwardly close to your face for them to work.
Is that better?
It's much better, yes. Thank you.
A little too better. All right. Okay, so the Reparations Task Force was established in August of 2020 through a City Council resolution. I know that none of the sponsors of that resolution are, they're no longer on the City Council, so I thought I would just go very briefly through what we were charged to do. It was meant to initiate a study of the historical involvement and impacts of the institution of slavery in the city of Burlington, and to develop a proposal to address said history, including the possibility of enacting resolutions, policies, and a number of other things. Membership within this task force was determined through negotiation, so there were 5 different appointees. The REIB director, a representative from the Vermont Human Rights Commission, or appointed by, one appointed by the City Council President, one appointed by the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and one by the Burlington Mayor's Office. So I've been on this since it was founded in 2020 as that mayoral representative. The Vermont Racial Justice Alliance member, Christine Hughes, has also been on since then. The City Council member, President's appointee, Rebecca Zeitlow, served until 2023. The Vermont Human Rights Commission representatives, we've had 2 who have attended 5 out of our 25 meetings in total. And the REIB directors at different points, we've had 2 different REIB directors and an interim director at 2 different points. One of the challenges for us on the task force has really been a lack of engagement by the members. And so it's been difficult in different ways to carry out our charge. We met somewhat regularly at the beginning in 2020 and 2021, and I want to acknowledge that obviously a lot of this work was taking place at the outset at the height of the pandemic, and so there were lots of disruptions ongoing. The chairs, as I said, were the REIB directors until this last year. I took over as chair in 2024 through the vote of those of us who were left. We did not meet between 2021 and 2022 for 1 year. We did not meet between July 2021 and July 2022 for 1 year. The chair did not call a meeting. Prior to that, we had worked to create an RFP for consultants. One of the things we were asked to do was to look into the history of reparations, of slavery in the city of Burlington, and to investigate reparations. So we developed our RFPs, we put out calls, and then we scored some of the applicants. We did engage 2 consultants, one of whom presented us a pretty useful report going through census data, looking at the history and evidence of enslaved persons within the city. The second consultant report went down a rabbit hole that I think was not particularly useful, looking at the use of racialized covenants in the city. which as an urban geographer, I would have some opinions on in terms of this particular region. And then a third consultant report for a consultant who was selected by the chair at the time without involvement of the rest of the task force, and that was not a particularly useful set of consultants' reports. As I say, the task force was pretty dormant through 2021, 2022. We kind of picked up and tried to meet ourselves for a little while, tried to get things going again. I took up some of the work myself at UVM with some students and classes. We took some of the guidance we got on exploring city records for the use of racialized covenants. So we did some of that work. We tried to take up some of the other work that had been set for us by the resolution. So looking at what defines reparations, what are different examples that we have. We were particularly interested in the city level experiments, particularly the one in Evanston, Illinois. So we did a little bit of that work, and so that's been kind of where it's begun and ended. We've engaged at different points with counselors, with former Councillor Deng, with Councillor Travers, with Councillor Bergman and Councillor Grant. I found that particularly helpful when we met with them in last year, I believe in November of last year, where we had some clear direction around what we might do moving forward. In the original charge of this task force, we were given 26 meetings. That was the sort of length, the duration of the task force. I believe we've gotten up to 25. So Councillor Grant and Councillor Bergman asked us to present some recommendations on where to go next, what we would do if we were to ask for more funding. This task force used about half of the funding that was originally allocated by City Council. So originally about $50,000, I believe, was allocated. We used half of it. So we were asked about the funding requests. If we were to make another one, what would we do to kind of reconstitute the task force? So there's a couple of things that, again, I will say from my perspective. Again, the Racial Justice Alliance has presented some, there's some alignment between the things that we've said and some discrepancies. So I'll just end with putting some of those forward. In terms of what we've accomplished as a task force, what remains to be accomplished, as I said, there were 3 sets of consultant reports, some more useful than others. We also conducted some other research that I think would be useful and helpful. I would again say looking at the city of Evanston's what they have done is they essentially looked at their city and they looked at the way in which African American inhabitants were systematically excluded from housing in the city. And they created a fund. Anyone who could prove that their family had been in the city between 1919 and 1969 and had been essentially denied housing were eligible to apply to this fund to receive basically a grant of some kind to try and redress that particular harm. So again, that was a very specific harm that was identified and attempted to be addressed. In the course of our work, we did meet with other experts on reparations, mostly working at the national level, some of whom questioned whether or not reparations were an appropriate instrument to be engaged with at the local level, at the municipal level, versus the state or the national level. But Evanston was definitely one interesting example. What has not been completed include the following: a historical analysis of how the city of Burlington, including businesses and individuals, might have been involved in the institution of slavery, including through economic means. That was one thing that I was really interested in us doing more research on. Whether or not we found evidence of the actual bodies of enslaved people within the city, that does not necessarily absolve the city of Burlington necessarily from that broader legacy and institution of slavery. We did not do that. A review of the cases and incidents of discrimination in the period following the abolition of slavery to the present in the city of Burlington as applicable to the descendants of enslaved persons. That was also laid out very clearly in the resolution, something we also did not do. A set of recommendations on specific reparations mechanisms and strategies for the city of Burlington to consider either in the abstract or with reference to specific cases and populations. Again, we did not do that. So the process for moving forward, I would hope, is if task force is re-empaneled, re-empowered, that all the positions need to be filled, however those are determined. I would recommend establishing a regular reporting schedule to RIB committees or to City Council, a more regular reporting schedule to City Council, a work schedule for the task force, clear staff support and reporting lines with the city or REIB, identify priorities for the task force, and establish a clear and feasible schedule for advancing these. I've been involved with Truth and Reconciliation commissions with national organizations and in other areas, and one of the things that is really difficult to produce is any kind of outcome when you don't have those clear guidelines and clear structures. So the specific recommendations that I would suggest is to revisit the original City Council resolution. I would think about narrowing the scope of what is intended by it, because I think it does start out narrow and then it grows pretty large. And I think that you may want to give, again, a task force something a bit more actionable. As I said before, I do not think the area of racialized covenants was an issue that really bore the kind of effort that we put into it or the resources that we put into it. And our initial studies did not find that that was an area. There were other areas that we definitely thought bore further investigation. Consider the value of the proposed apology to adopt. Again, this is a personal view, but I am not a great one for symbolic gestures that do not carry concrete consequences behind them. Consider what funding source would be utilized for providing adequate compensation for any reparations program. Again, take a look at the City of Evanston's approach. Develop a strategy for enacting the mechanisms for providing reparations. What city department would be responsible for dispersing compensation? Who would be responsible for determining eligibility? That is one of the stickiest questions that I think has to be addressed. And finally, engage in a strategy for community outreach and education to discuss with the City of Burlington populations what is meant by and what the potential there is and need for reparations. And finally, I'll just say that in terms of funding, I'm not going to make any specific suggestions for what the funding would be used for, but again, to, I think, an excellent question that Councilors Bergman and Grant posed to us. You know, what would you actually use the money for? And I think being very clear about that and being clear about the outcomes being sought. So I will leave it at that and take any questions.
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. Are there any councilors that wish to get in the queue on this item? Councilor Grant.
Thanks for coming in tonight. I know, I don't want to rehash history, but I know the turnover in the department and the leadership issues was part of the reason why there wasn't consistency and guidance and being able to do the work. So I look forward to having another conversation about this at the REIB committee meeting. But in terms of moving forward, have you thought about, do you have anything you'd like to say in terms of, it may not be finalized, but what you would be thinking about, all right, if we want to continue to move forward, what would be the specific things you would consider doing?
I think that's a great question. I think for me, one of the things that would help a task force moving forward, and I have to say that I won't be continuing on the task force just because, again, I was part of the previous task force. I'm also up to my neck in other things in my current job. But I would say, again, setting people up for some success would involve perhaps a clearer mandate. I think it is really hard to know exactly what it is. There are very different definitions of what reparations means. And so I've said several times this Evanston program. That Evanston's program has also been really, on the one hand, it's been lauded by some as saying, this is something that repairs this harm. There are many others who say, this repairs this harm, but this isn't reparations. Because for them, it's, they say, look, you figured out a way to compensate 16 of the 12,000 Black individuals who live in Evanston today, right? That's not reparations. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about education. We're talking about these other kinds of things. So really, what is meant by reparations? That is something that I think has to be a starting point for any committee. And I think, what is the, we also struggled with the fact that the resolution lays out very clearly who this is talking about. Right? This is about the descendants of enslaved persons of African descent. But it opened up all sorts of other questions of what does it mean when you then also talk about those who live with the legacies of racism that come about because of that kind of original sin. Well, there are a lot of other people in this city who certainly experience experience racism, but are not from that lineage. And so, how do you deal with those kinds of things? And we had that. We had, kind of challenge to us around those kinds of questions. So, empowering that task force with being able to answer some of those questions, and they're hard questions.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. I have Councillor Newbeezer and then Councillor Bergman.
I just wanted to say thank you for all your work. I think we talked on the phone a year or so ago now, and getting some more context from you on this was helpful. I don't have too much to add. I just wanted to recognize all the work of the committee and of you, and I've been part of many a working group, as everybody has, and I just think you've shown a great deal of thoroughness and dedication to this, so thank you.
I really appreciate it. I did want to also follow up on one other thing that Councillor Grant said that your comments also make me think is I'm frustrated with what we didn't get done, but I also don't want to be throwing people under the bus and saying, I said the lack of engagement. There's all sorts of reasons that lack of engagement may have happened, and there's a lot of chaos in this, and people who engaged with this this task force engaged because they believed in the work that it was doing. And whether that resulted in an optimal outcome or not, they did really believe in this, but perhaps the task was a little too large to take on. So I also want to acknowledge the hard work that Christine Hughes in particular has put a ton of time and effort into this.
Thank you, Councillor Newbeezer. Councillor Bergman.
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo, for all of this work that you've done. It would be probably really helpful and enlightening if we could get the reports that are synopsized. And I say that because in large part, if we don't really know the history, if we don't know the numbers, then we can't begin to understand the magnitude of the problem. We are not at the epicenter of neither the slave trade nor the cotton industry, but we benefited. The insurance business in Hartford, Connecticut is founded on slave labor, right? And we had a cotton industry here, manufacturing in Queen City that I know just started in the late 1800s, but I believe that Jim Crow was deep and embedded and vicious in 1895 when the Queen City cotton mills were built. And that's a legacy of slavery. So the underlying studies, I think, would be helpful. When I look at your recommendations and I look at the racial justice alliances, I don't actually see a lot of differences between them, and so I look forward to this conversation happening in the REIB, because the truth is we need to reveal the truth. There are a whole lot of folks in this country, very powerful folks, who want to bury our history under a ton of garbage. And our job, my job, is to see that that doesn't happen. So I sort of look forward to getting those reports and us being able then to have them, those reports here, because, you know, you still get the myths about how, you know, somehow there ain't black folk here and nothing was ever wrong here and it's got nothing to do with us. And I don't believe it, and I don't believe that the truth and the history bear that out. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. And that's what those stories and you know, those studies are about. And just going forward, I mean, it seems like at the very least, the history, the understanding, and then the grappling with the questions that you have posed and that Mark has posed are our next steps. And I think that is worthy. If you were allocated $50,000 and you spent $25,000, I know we are in tight times, but perhaps that would be money well spent to advance things to the next level. This is not a problem that is going to go away despite an attempt to ban the thinking about diversity and equity and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. I definitely agree with everything you said. One of the areas that I really do think that we, you know, your comments about, you know, textiles, you know, where did we get the cotton from, et cetera. One of the real gaps for us was, unfortunately, I was trying to get either my former colleague Amani Whitfield, who left Vermont, but he is really an expert in this particular area. He was just too busy, but he would be somebody. There are others. There's a new historian at UVM, Pamela Walker, who'd also be excellent. So I was trying to engage them. I would love for them to get involved. Pamela's pretty new here, and I've talked to her a little bit about this. She's really interested, and I think getting that involvement, uncovering some of that history. I'm sorry, in the report that I actually gave you, and partly because this was a draft, I was trying not to make this my report, and I wanted more involvement from others, but that didn't happen. But we'll also make sure that all of the work that we actually commissioned is available. One really interesting thing we found when I had the classes at UVM go through the land records, and no, we didn't find the use of racialized covenants, but what we did find was in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, the Burlington area NAACP created really interesting, extensive reports about the ways in which African Americans were being systematically discriminated against in housing. And that's out there. It's not something that we recognize or, you know, and so there's that kind of thing that's out there that is very much worth investigating further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bergman. We have a little more than a minute left on this item. Is there any other councillor that wishes to be recognized on it? All right, well, I think that pretty much brings us to time. Thanks again, Pablo. Appreciate your being here this evening, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. We now turn to item 7 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. May I get a motion from a councillor to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated? Thank you, Councillor Shannon. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Newbeezer. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, before going to a vote, I will note my recusal due to a professional conflict of interest on item 7.22. With that recusal in mind, we will go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We now turn to our deliberative agenda. And the first item on our deliberative agenda is item 8.1, resolution doubling Burlington's investment in affordable housing. And for a motion on this item, I turn to the resolution sponsor, Councillor Newbeezer.
1 second, sorry about that. My laptop's loading here.
The recommended action on 8.1 is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. If you'd like to make that motion, Councillor Newbeezer, I'd happy to give you the floor back upon a second.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Thank you, Councillor Bergman. Councillor Newbeezer, I assumed you would like the floor on this item?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. Really excited to bring forward this resolution and appreciate folks across the council engaging on it and for folks who are willing to co-sponsor. I just wanted to run through. So in short, this resolution asks city staff to produce a report outlining a variety of ways we can increase funding for the Housing Trust Fund by at least $1 million, which would roughly equate to a doubling of the amount of money we invest in affordable housing. The report asks both for ways that we have the current authority as a city to pursue, as well as pathways that we would need a charter change to pursue. It also asks that as staff is trying to find this $1 million, we include options that are either A, revenue neutral, meaning they're not going to further burden taxpayers, or B, if they do raise new revenue, that revenue must impact only those at the very top, large businesses and tourists. Now, the reason I think this is so needed, and you heard some of it in public comment, we have an incredibly successful model that was created in the Housing Trust Fund to fund and maintain permanently affordable units in our city. Right now, we know that the median sale of a home in Burlington is well over $500,000. Roughly 60% of Burlingtonians are renters. Of those renters, 31% of them, nearly a third, spend more than half of their income on rent in Burlington. As we all know, in the last few years, we've seen record number of folks sleeping outdoors and not having access to safe, reliable shelter. We also know that the University of Vermont continues not to take responsibility for housing enough students on campus, and we have a very, very low vacancy rate. While $1 million may seem like an aggressive goal, I think what I would pose to folks is that it's actually a first step, but we should even be looking further in the years to come. Affordable housing as public safety is as well, seems to me to be the top two priorities communicated to us as a body and as a city. And right now our funding, if we're talking about, last year was a bit of a bump, but say we give approximately $1 million a year into the Housing Trust Fund, that equates to less than 1% of our annual city budget. Even by doubling it, we're still not going to make even a 2% equivalent investment. And so I think this is very much a first step in the right direction. And with that, I will pass back to you, Council President.
Thank you very much, Councilor Newbeezer. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on this item? Councilor Broderick, I see you.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution in accordance with the item on Civic Clerk under this item called Proposed Amendment to Agenda Item 8.1 per Councilor Newbeezer, but it's my amendment. And I would like to slot that as a whereas clause, as the final whereas clause, following line 39.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Broderick. I will note that posted on Civic Clerk earlier this evening was a proposed amendment with a new whereas clause. If councilors or members of the public want to see it, your proposal is that it would be added as the final whereas clause before the first resolved clause. Is there a second to Councilor Broderick's motion to amend? second by Councillor Newbeezer. I suppose I will ask whether or not, I'm trying to remember who was the seconder. It was you, Councillor Bergman, right? So I will ask you first, Councillor Newbeezer, as the sponsor, and then Councillor Bergman as the seconder, if you are friendly to Councillor Broderick's amendment.
Yes.
Okay. So given that the amendment is friendly to both the maker of the underlying motion and the seconder, then it is amended, as you have suggested, Councillor Broderick. So proceeding now with the resolution as now amended, are there any other councillors that wish to be recognized on this item? Councillor Shannon.
Thank you, President Travers. There's a whereas clause on line 9 that I think is true, but I don't think that, I think that there is some additional clarifying language that might be important. So that whereas clause says, whereas our municipal and state property tax systems are unfair and untenable, during the last reassessment when COVID hit, the burden of funding our city's general fund shifted from commercial properties owners, leaving residents with significantly higher tax bills. Statewide, the highest income Vermonters pay a smaller share of their income taxes than many in the middle class. It is true that there was a burden that shifted from the residential property to commercial property because of increased values in residential property relative to commercial property, which actually did not have anything to do with COVID. But what is often not recognized when people are talking about this is that we're already taxing businesses at 120% of their value. And I think that that's important to note as we're going into this and looking for other sources of taxation to build this fund. And so I'm hoping it might be friendly to the makers to just add a whereas clause after that that simply states that, whereas commercial property in Burlington is taxed at 120% of its value.
Okay, so Councillor Shannon has proposed an amendment to after the whereas clause. The last sentence of that's on line 12, so I'm assuming you're saying after line 12, Councillor Shannon, that you're suggesting. Could you read the proposed amendment again?
Yes, whereas commercial property in Burlington is taxed at 120% of its assessed value.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shannon. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Barlow. Before turning to any discussion on it, I will ask you, Councillor Newbeezer, whether or not you are friendly to that amendment.
I am friendly to that amendment.
Okay, and Councillor Bergman?
Well, I think if it was tempered by some language that would state that that was in an earlier effort to address the regressivity of the property tax, since it would be acceptable if we added that language. In an earlier effort to address the regressivity of the property tax, and then you have what you said, it would be friendly with that little clause that I've just suggested you add, and I'm seeing a shaking by both the maker and the yes. As somebody who was here during the time that we adopted the 120%, I think that's important context. So I don't know who has the language.
Well,
I can work on something to circulate as we discuss.
Okay.
Or you can take a break for 2 minutes and I'll have it.
Okay. Well, we are still on the, we're still on the motion to amend for the moment, so we do not have a confirmation yet on that language. And so I think what will be in order, Councillor Shannon, when you're ready for it, would actually be a motion to amend the amendment, perhaps in line with what Councillor Bergman had said there. But as you write that up, and thank you very much for doing that, I will take some liberty with folks being able to speak to the underlying item sort of outside of the specific amendment, and wondering if there are any other councillors that wish to be recognized on this resolution in general. Councillor Litwin.
I'll be brief. Well, maybe I won't be brief so that Councillor Shannon can have some extra time, but
it'll take that long.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ultimately, I'm not sure, and I don't like to make assumptions, one of the only people at this table who currently benefits from and lives in affordable rental housing. I have lived in a Champlain Housing Trust building, which was mentioned here tonight, actually by Champlain Housing Trust for 12 years. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. I would not be able to stay in Burlington and serve as a city councilor without it. So I'm deeply connected to the content and the spirit of this resolution. I retain the concerns that I had on the CDNR committee, which I serve on with Councillor Newbeezer and Councillor Kane, which is, and I see there's been some language updates since we last met, which is helpful actually, but I am concerned about the lack of clarity around what we mean about progressive taxation measures and the word only. And additionally, because this, in my opinion, perhaps others would disagree, has moved quite quickly, it has not afforded me the time to do my due diligence in better understanding the income expenditures that are coming and going from the housing fund as it stands. And I do not want us to go down a path where we are asking CEDO or some other committee to come up with a way to fund $1 million, which is desperately needed for affordable housing, and have that money potentially eaten up in administrative or operational expenses, often which are not allowed under federal and state grants. And so, for example, quite a bit of salary and fringe is coming out of this account. Back of the envelope math, as President Travers always says, it's like 30% or 25% of the total expenditures from last year is just from salary and fringe for someone's position. And then, so I would like us to make sure that we have a commitment to reducing the dependency to fund other things out of this. This should be going to units. This money should be going to building more units, which is what we heard tonight. It's what we're hearing from my fellow councilors, and I personally struggle with this as written. However, I will vote to support the underlying move to study this, but ask that we have a commitment to reducing our dependency on using this money for administrative fees and oversight, and salary and benefits.
Thank you, Councillor Litwin. Is there any other councillor that wishes to be recognized? Yeah, Councillor Grant, go ahead.
So I just want us to be really mindful of the fact that, work needs to be done. If we're going to work to increase the funds going into this trust, work literally needs to be done. And we need to be prepared to look and think out of the box in ways that we haven't been, because we don't know what's going to be happening at the federal level. We already know they threatened to shut grants down, then they said they weren't going to do it because they were backlash, but we've heard from nonprofits in our state that they've lost access to their payment portals. So we're going to need people looking to to people who have the funds and still have who still care about the communities that they live in, our states, our country, and the overall crisis that we're seeing, who may be offering grants. So there's going to need to be the work to go after that. Whoever's doing that work needs to be paid. So if we're going to try to increase the success of the trust and increase the type of money, it should not come to a surprise that there may be an increase in administrative costs, because we want to pay people for their work. And I think that, we'll get reporting on those costs. We'll keep an eye on it. But I just think we have to be very careful when we say things like, no, we don't want, we don't want to see an increase when, well, if we want the increase in the money, there has to be an increase in work. And you've got to pay people for doing the work. Thank you.
Point of inquiry.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Yeah, Councillor Litwin.
I'd just like to use the point of inquiry to ask Councillor Grant to clarify something so I can make a better voting decision, if I may be permitted, under the Roberts rules.
Sure, you
Thank you.
may, well.
That's what it says in Roberts rules.
Excuse me, Councillor Litwin, please. Councillor Grant, technically speaking, the floor is still yours. Councillor Litwin is asking if he may inquire of you, so will you yield the floor to Councillor Litwin to ask that question?
I kind of felt like what I said was clear enough, honestly.
Okay, so you do not yield the floor to an inquiry from Councillor Litwin?
I don't think I need to. I think I was pretty clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We next had Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. With the addition of my amendment and other additions from before this meeting to the original version, I'm in a place that I can now vote yes on this resolution because I do believe that a well-funded housing trust fund is extremely important to supporting tenants and creating perpetually affordable housing. But I did want to briefly talk about why it's so important. It was so important for me to have this whereas clause added that I consider a very important piece of context that was missing from the resolution relating to our housing and affordability crisis. Specifically, it states that decades of state and local land use and zoning regulations, it had stymied a lot of development in our city, which really kneecapped our ability to grow our housing stock to meet demand, and we're experiencing the consequences of that today. And while that mistake has begun to be rectified on both the state and the city level, more needs to be done to allow for the equitable densification that our city needs to address its housing woes. I emphasize the importance of having this context as we look to find these solutions to our housing crisis, because I just want us to all be mindful that there is no one cause. This comes from just my interactions in the community. I'm not here. I don't think anyone on this council strictly believes this, but it's not merely UVM and students living off campus that are driving Burlington's housing unaffordability. In fact, it's my belief that students living off the hill, whether it's in UVM-built housing or not, greatly benefits Burlington economically and socially. And the idea that I have heard some in our community hold that removing students from the off-campus housing market will put us on this path to ample and affordable housing is short-sighted and would come with unintended consequences for our city. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind going into the future, especially when we get to a point where we can negotiate with UVM again. And therefore, I think this context is extremely integral for a resolution that takes steps to tackle this crisis. Furthermore, like I said, I do support this study, and I'm hopeful that it might bring us ways to adequately fund our housing trust fund. I do so while recognizing that, in my view and the view of many members of the public, that in order to make the financial commitment that we must in order to make a real impact on housing and affordability in the near future, the city's non-property tax means of generating that money without going through an unfriendly Montpelier are limited. And I hope that the study will prove me wrong, but regardless, I think we have to keep all options open and be prepared to commit the resources necessary to create real material change for both the many folks who are struggling or cannot afford housing and those who seek to join our community and come to Burlington and live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. I have Councilor Barlow next in queue, but before turning to you, Councilor Barlow, first of all, we are at time on this item, so can I please get a sense as to, I see you, Councilor McKnight, as well. Are there any other councilors in addition to Councilors Barlow and McKnight that wish to be recognized on this item? Councilor Shannon, you wish to have the floor back again on the underlying item, or, okay. Okay, all right. So before turning to you, Councilor Barlow, if I could just ask, I do know that Councilor Shannon had circulated a proposed amendment. Councilor Bergman, did you have an opportunity to review it?
I did, and looking at the maker of the underlying resolution, I am okay with accepting it as well.
Okay, so I think if we're going to do this right, then we still have Councilor Shannon's original amendment. Councilor Shannon, my understanding is that you would like to now amend your original amendment as was circulated, and could I turn to you perhaps to just sort of state what the new language is?
The new language is, whereas in an effort to address the regressivity of property taxes, Burlington has long been taxing commercial property at 120% of its value.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Shannon. I'm assuming that that is friendly to you as the maker. Councilor Barlow, is the amendment to the amendment friendly to you as well?
It is.
Okay. So now I will turn to Councilor Newbeezer and Councilor Bergman. The amendment as amended, is it friendly to both of you?
It is.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you to you both. So Councilor Shannon, I would just ask that you please forward that language to Lori Olberg and the City Attorney's Office. Okay, great. All right. Okay. If we could also forward it to the City Attorney's Office to make sure that it's incorporated after that whereas clause. And now, Councilor Barlow, I will turn the floor to you. I will note that we are over the time allotted on this item, but appreciate your attention to that. Okay, thank you, Councilor Barlow.
And I too, I'm supporting this tonight. You know, housing is, as others have said, one of our #1 priorities. And so I look forward to the conversations about this with Councilor Kane and others in the Tax Fairness Working Group. And I did want to point out one thing. I don't need an amendment, but I think we should all be mindful of this, is that we have done some work to increase the balance in the Housing Trust Fund. In fiscal 22, there was $130,000 in there. And the current balance is almost $3 million. So that's almost a 23-fold increase in the value of that. And so I don't need it in as a whereas in the resolution, but I think it is also historical context to point out that this is another success that we've had on the council. And that's really all I wanted to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor McKnight?
Thank you. I'm also supportive of this resolution and happy to have it brought in front of us. And thank you to Councilor Newbeezer for some helpful back and forth that we had. I had proposed what I'm talking about here as an addition to the resolution, but since Councilor Newbeezer indicated that he did not think that was appropriate, I thought it's similar to Councilor Barlow's suggestion. I would like to request, and I see Director Pine back there, hopefully, you can hear me. I see you nodding. Okay. When this comes to CDNR, I guess just to back up, I learned a lot today about the Housing Trust Fund, which I was grateful to have that opportunity to do. I did have a hard time finding all of the various data and reports, and I know there are already mandatory, there's mandatory financial reporting, there's mandatory reporting in the form of an annual report in terms of what funds are granted and who, the organizations they're granted to, but it's a lot of information and it wasn't kind of put together all in one place ahead of this meeting. So what I would ask is that when you come back to CDNR, that you also attach kind of the most recent income and expense report as it relates to the Housing Trust Fund in terms of CEDO's expenses as well as disbursement information, because I need that information all kind of in one place in order to assess, you know, what our best paths are for potentially raising new revenue or finding new funding sources. So I'll just make that request here. It's all publicly available data that we're already collecting, so just wanted to put that out there as we move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McKnight. Councilor Shannon, you are the last I have in queue on this item. So we'll go to you, Councilor Shannon, and then perhaps a vote.
Thank you. The reason that we have now $3 million in the Housing Trust Fund is because we are taxing Airbnbs at an enormously high rate that I completely support as long as we're going to have those Airbnbs. But my preference truly would be that those Airbnbs were housing units. And I don't know that we really have an analysis as to how many units the tax that is generated that has gone into the Housing Trust Fund, how many units is that coming from? How many units can we build with that money in the Housing Trust Fund? Is it worth the trade-off? Because building units is really slow in this community. And we are losing units from the very source that is feeding this fund, which I find a little bit ironic. So as much as I want to build or double the Housing Trust Fund, which I do, where it comes from matters. And I appreciate in here, there's a statement, that we want to generate new revenue through progressive taxation, meaning those residents and businesses with the highest incomes and largest amount of wealth pay more than Burlington's working and middle class. Revenue that may also be generated by tourists visiting our cities. Well, the people staying in our Airbnbs are certainly by definition tourists visiting our cities. And we are taxing them. But I just want to point out here that the devil is in the details. And we don't actually know what the income or wealth of our residents are currently. So I am concerned that, I know that the mayor has the Tax Fairness Working Group. Maybe something will change in the future, but until we know what those changes are, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to accomplish the goals of this resolution. Nonetheless, I laud the goals of the resolution, and for that reason, I will support it. But with hesitance about what comes back and what we could possibly know related to this by May 15th of this year. I don't think we're going to have the answers to this by May 15th of this year, but that will be for you all to figure out, and I will leave it to you to try and meet that lofty deadline.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Councilor Newbeezer had asked to be recognized as well, although we've already done a first round. As the sponsor of the resolution, Councilor Newbeezer, I'll give you the last word, and then we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, and thanks for all the discussion. I just want to be clear to folks as we're having, and to the public as we're having these conversations about all these amendments. I'm happy to, a lot of these whereas clauses or amendments I don't totally agree with. I'm happy to accept them because at the end of the day, my barometer, honestly, when I ran was, can I move more money to supporting the development of permanently affordable units? And so you know, I see it personally as if I can get more money to a model that has a long track record that is incredibly efficient. The money goes to a dedicated web of nonprofit folks who, if you've spoken to any of them, and many of us have, for more than a few minutes, you know that they are incredibly mission-driven, incredibly efficient, stretch every single dollar. And so when we talk about efficient, effective programs through our government to support affordable housing, you know, our housing trust funds, I can't think of a better example. So I appreciate folks supporting this. I look forward to city staff reporting back on it. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newbeezer. We will now go to a vote on this item. The motion now is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Newbeezer, for your work on that item. And to the CDNR committee, I should mention, which is Councillors Kane and Litwin. So, item 8.2 is a resolution, municipal resolution for Downtown Transportation Fund. This comes to us with the unanimous support of the Board of Finance this evening. We have DPW Director Chapin Spencer here this evening, as well as Sarah. I don't have your exact title right in front of me, but I will ask Director Spencer if he could please introduce you and your title. Apologies for that, and the rest of the team here, and we'll give you all the floor.
Thank you, President Travers. Chapin Spencer, Director of Public Works. I'm joined tonight by Peter Procaccio, who is our Senior Public Works Engineer, and Sarah Birmingham, who's on the grant team in the Clerk Treasurer's Office. And we are pleased to be here in front of you tonight, seeking your approval to apply for a Vermont Downtown Transportation Grant to fund an array of street furniture and amenities for Great Streets Main Street. I will, before passing it along, just frame this issue here. The project has financial constraints. We bid Great Streets Main Street during an inflationary environment, and we had to value engineer the project from the get-go. We had to reduce the project from 6 blocks to 3 blocks. We had to remove much of the street furnishings in the project to get to a place where we could move forward. The team is continuing to proactively look to find other revenue sources so we can put the important street amenities back into the project. And this is an effort to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Peter to give an update on where the project sits, and then over to Sarah.
Evening. I'm Peter Procaccio. I'm one of the senior public works engineers working on this project. Giving you a little snapshot today, not meant to be totally comprehensive of the project, but where we stand and what's remaining on the project. What's been done to date, as we all know, the project involves reconstruction of aging infrastructure as well as the street furnishings that Chapin mentioned, but some of that aging infrastructure is sewer and stormwater related. Currently, the contractor has constructed new sewer mains and service connections and has progressed east of the South Winooski and Main Street intersection, requiring the shutdown of the Main and South Winooski intersection as that sewer main continues to be installed further eastward to the project limits. The water main construction, the contractor has completed new water main and service connections west of Church Street and is preparing to install a new temporary water main east of Church Street. This temporary water main will require a brief cutover, but will maintain that water service during the construction. That block of east of Church Street on Main is where we actually pick up 2 parallel water mains, as opposed to further west where there was just a single water main in the Main Street section. This translates to a longer duration and presence of construction crews while these new mains are installed. What's next? Water and sewer replacement work will continue for the remainder of 2025, with water and sewer mains installed to the east towards South Union Street at the eastern extent of the project. Folks probably see a large excavation right next to City Hall Park. That is for two of three stormwater detention tanks that are a part of this project as well. Those are going to be installed over the coming weeks, and after the tanks near City Hall Park are completed, crews will move down towards Pine Street, where another tank will be excavated and installed. The western end of the project, from Pine Street to St. Paul, could see some of those streetscape elements that Chapin mentioned completed by the end of 2025, with the balance of streetscape and landscaping and public art installations completing in 2026. Some of the challenges we've encountered on this project are synonymous with urban construction. The extremely deep sewer main that is required to reconstruct this project and divert flows from the aging ravine sewer cuts right down the center of Main Street, and we have to live with that through the intersections, supporting existing utilities and other elements that need to remain in place. We also encounter on a daily basis unmapped legacy utilities that our contractor is agile and incredibly adept at maintaining. This infrastructure construction has created impacts to businesses, citizens, and visitors. Intersection closures, detours, parking stall removals and changes, and changing traffic patterns for both vehicles and pedestrians evolve with every stage of this project and the work zones. The DPW uses various media to communicate these known changes to the public, including a standing Main Street project website, VT alerts, weekly business emails that describe where to park, what streets are closed, and direct outreach to businesses. Balancing the business community's needs with to drive vehicle and pedestrian traffic in the project area without impeding the contractor's ability to complete work, and also maintaining fire and emergency vehicle access to and through the site is a challenge, and it's a great focus for DPW staff. DPW has and will continue to coordinate with businesses along the corridor to understand needs and make accommodations. Just a sampling of what we're doing on a daily basis with our contractor is, again, extensive outreach to businesses, one-on-one meetings. We actually delayed the closure of the Main Street and South Winooski intersection past the fall season to accommodate the holiday period, so businesses could have more consistent access during construction. And we set up designated parking and loading zones for businesses. An example of this is a dedicated area near the Church Street, Main Street intersection for bands that are visiting Nectar's to unload equipment while they prepare for the night. We've interacted with AARP Vermont to understand where we can be better at getting folks who are elderly or have limited access to and through the site as well.
Hello, I'm Sarah Birmingham. I'm a grants associate in the clerk treasurer's office, and I've been assisting the DPW team in developing the application for this. So I'll start with some background on the opportunity that's at the core of the resolution before you tonight. The Downtown Transportation Fund is a financing tool which assists municipalities in paying for transportation-related capital improvements within designated downtown districts. This is a joint investment by the Vermont Agency of Transportation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development that supports the state's ongoing commitment to improving quality of life and fostering vibrant, connected communities. These investments are vital to drawing people downtown, supporting businesses, and enhancing our downtown core. This program aims to serve all modes of transportation by prioritizing pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit to create safer, more inclusive, and sustainable environments for everyone. Some details about the project we're proposing is, well, first, it's a $200K max for grant awards, and a local match is required. 20% of the project cost must be coming from a local match. So a match of $50,000 will be coming from previously approved downtown TIF funding for a total project budget of $250K. Grant funds may not be used for general operating or maintenance costs. Our budget for this application covers the cost to purchase the amenities, including 21 benches, 19 bike racks, a bus shelter, granite elevation indicators, some staff time, and a 10% contingency. Last time we were awarded this grant was in 2012 for $100,000 to install the lighting in the Church Street Marketplace. Our proposal has been approved through the state's historic review process. And yeah, the application is due on 2/17, and we must have approval from the Planning Commission and City Council to submit the application. We will need an approved resolution for our application packet. And some timeline details. The award decisions will be announced in April 2025, and projects must be under construction within 24 months and completed within 36 months.
We're happy to answer any questions. Just want to thank the Clerk Treasurer's grant team for helping us out on this one.
Appreciate it. Councilor Barlow, I didn't give you a warning about this beforehand, but I'm wondering if, as chair of the TOOC, I could turn to you for a motion on the item.
I'd be happy to. I move to approve and recommend that the City Council authorize the Director of Public Works and the grants team to apply for the Downtown Transportation Fund grant administered by VACCD for the Main Street amenities in the amount of $200,000, obligating the city to commit a local match of $50,000 to the total project budget of $250,000, subject to approval by the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilor Bergman. Are there any councilors that wish to be recognized on this item? Councilor Litwin.
Yeah, I just want to ask to make sure I'm following clearly, which is, would this come back before the council should you be awarded the grant, or are we just pre-authorizing right now the spending of $50,000 should you be awarded the grant?
The funds, this grant requires us to get your approval prior to applying, which is not the situation in many grants. So we are here really just seeking your approval to apply. That said, the $50,000 match is coming from a previously approved, part of the previously approved budget for Great Streets, Main Street. So we would need to look at the new purchasing policy. I'm not as fully adept on it as I should be as to whether or not this had to come back to council for acceptance.
Okay, and has there been any changes to what you are planning to spend them? And forgive me, I did have to step out for just a second, so you may have covered this. You know, there was, last time I looked at it, there was cost for bus shelters and so forth, and, you know, we just removed bus shelters in some locations of the city, and we've had issues with bus shelters in some locations, not too far from Main Street. And so I'm concerned about how can we rein in this cost as we head into fiscal year 26 and 27, and a lot of the challenges that your office and every other office is no stranger to right now, you know, authorizing that spending. And I realize it's previously authorized based on your comments, Director, but I remain concerned about the ongoing fiscal issues that the city is facing, and that is making me hesitant to vote yes tonight. So have you been able to like reduce, you know, can we take less money? Do we need all the bus shelters? Do we need 20 bike racks or however many were listed?
The amenities that we have here are partial restoration of the full range of amenities that we want truly along this corridor to celebrate the vibrancy and the public space that we are creating that has more public activation areas, wider sidewalks, more pause places and the like, and we need something to fill that space to really make it come alive. If in the end the committee or the community decides that we do not want to utilize bus shelters at this point, we could request the grant funder to adjust the range of street furniture needed. As someone who has spent 2 decades supporting transit in downtown, I'm hoping that the removal of bus shelters is a short-term strategy at various problem locations, but not an overall removal across the system.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Are there any other councilors that wish to be recognized on this item? All right. Seeing none, then we will go to a vote. All in favor of the motion made by Councilor Barlow, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
I will note that the vote is then, I got to do my math right here, 10-1. Councilor Carpenter's not here, 9-1 with Councilor Litwin voting in the negative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next 2 items on the deliberative agenda are items 8.3 and 8.4. These are both proposed zoning amendments that come our way from the Planning Commission. We have our Director of Planning, Charles Dillard, here this evening. And Charles, my understanding is that you would be prepared to present on both of these items. It's not on, Charles. Sorry.
Mic issues tonight. I'm happy to present. I'm also happy to just walk through both of the amendments and answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Why don't we turn to item 8.3 first. On this item, the recommended action is to waive the first reading and refer to the Ordinance Committee. Councilor Shannon, as chair of the Ordinance Committee, could I turn to you for a motion on that recommended action?
Yes, I move to waive the reading and refer to the Ordinance Committee.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Bergman. I appreciate your willingness to present on this, Director Dillard, but perhaps before you even do that, I know this is the first it's coming before the council, and the proposed motion is to send it to the Ordinance Committee. If I could turn to any councilors here to ask if you have any specific questions or comments on this item regarding performing arts centers in the ELM district. Councilor Bergman.
I have mentioned to Charles, and I just want to make this public, that I think that we are going to need to deal with the parking and traffic issues with regard to this. Clearly, if this is going to be successful, and I hope it is, and I hope we actually come through, there's likely to be lots of people driving. There's likely to be the need for people to park. And my hope is that we can work through those details in the context of the deliberations in the Ordinance Committee, or at least frame that out. So I just wanted to put that on the table here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. I just wondered if this is something that, not the zoning specifically, but the reason that we're doing this and the intention to accommodate higher ground at BCA was something that we did during the pandemic very successfully, accommodated the cars, and surprisingly, there were no noise issues whatsoever for outdoor events on a weekly basis. And I wondered if there is anything different about this than what had been done already very successfully and without any concerns that I ever heard from neighbors.
Just making sure I understand, are you asking if this proposal or this arrangement would be any different than the outdoor concerts that were held during the pandemic?
Well, like my question is in terms of the square footage that previously operated, the number of people that were accommodated in that way. Is this, would this accommodate more people? Would this attract more traffic than what we've already seen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wasn't around at the time. I'm happy to speak to my colleagues and speak with Higher Ground to see if they have numbers on how many attendees were coming down to Pine Street at the time. The difference, though, the great difference would be that this would be indoors, and so any noise impacts would be mitigated. In that way, parking, though, it's hard to tell. I'm not sure at the time how people were coming down to Pine Street. Was it more localized attendance and fewer people driving? Or is it more typical of what Higher Ground sees on a regular basis where people are driving from really all over the region? Happy to talk with them about that.
That would be really helpful information, I think, for my constituents. I think that I have heard some concerns, but I don't think that people realize we have actually already done this, and we've done it outside. So to be able to explain, what was previously done that some people are aware of, some people are not aware of, would help them better understand what the impacts will be on their neighborhoods as we have this discussion. Thanks.
Councilor Litwin.
Thanks, and I appreciate you being here so late, but I have a lot of reservations around approving this now. So right now, for me, I think we're discussing this a little bit prematurely because this council and the TOOC committee have spent quite a bit of time talking about the Champlain Parkway and the impact that this is having on Pine Street and specifically the King Maple neighborhood. And we have received presentations from Director Spencer's office. I'm sorry, not Director Spencer. Yes, Director Spencer, that basically said that while this construction was ongoing, that intersection was going to see a 10% increase in traffic already, which we know that that neighborhood is already belabored. Additionally, the Rail Yard Enterprise project is still sort of, maybe coming together, I'm not sure, but certainly moving. And then we're talking about Secord. There's a lot happening right there. And I'm concerned about, we already have a pretty big traffic problem on Pine Street. It's a major artery, and we have a lot of construction going on in the city, and I am concerned about bringing in a lot more car traffic. Many Higher Ground shows attract people from, again, we talked about this with the hospital, it's a regional resource. People come in from all over northern and central Vermont for shows, and it's one of the premier entertainment facilities in the state. So I'm very hesitant to have this, and I'd love to hear what you think about approving this now while we are looking at projected increases in traffic in a neighborhood that we have all agreed, or I believe we have, does not need any more increases in traffic.
Point of information, this is just a first reading, right? So we're not approving anything except to send it to committee.
Correct. It's the first reading and it's being referred to committee. That's the motion. Councilor Litwin,
Thanks. I did still want answers to that question.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I mean, our office is sensitive to the King Maple neighborhood issues, and we would certainly work with Public Works on any mitigations to those ongoing and probably maybe exacerbated problems. The policy foundation is clear. Plan BTB South End does call for the further fostering of an arts sector in this part of the South End. It also calls for a network of shared parking facilities, and the work in the South End Coordinated Redevelopment is attempting to implement that on some scale further down Pine Street. I think with encouragement and with maybe some optimism, we could imagine that there could be some shared parking and cooperation among existing parking resources in the area. There's some large surface parking lots that are mainly dedicated to daytime office parking. And one can imagine that higher grounds, attendees mostly coming at night, could park there under an agreement. And so I think our office would be interested in seeing if that was a potential reality. I think that all of this would be done also with seeking to minimize folks parking in any neighborhood, really, not just King Maple, but further up the hill as well. I would point out that certainly these events are happening in the evening and at night, but Pine Street is probably the most well-served part of town in terms of bike infrastructure. There is a bus line. Currently, folks going out to higher ground on Williston Road will not be walking from Burlington, will not be biking from Burlington, so you can imagine that at least a portion of the folks who are currently driving down Williston Road would be taking alternative forms of transportation. And, you know, regarding community facilities, and this is in the memo that was sent to you, the city is investing in arts facilities in the South End, and I think in the interest of fostering that ecosystem, having an established business organization like Higher Ground that is interested not just in, you know, making money and bringing shows, but in fostering Vermont's music, musicians and music sector would help that. So I think just to close it all up, there is, I think, a lot of policy foundation for looking favorably upon this amendment, but certainly acknowledge, yeah, some of the concerns around parking and some of the other issues that might arise.
Thank you. I'm all set. I'm happy.
Thank you. Are there any other councilors that wish to be recognized? Yes, Councilor Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. So you know, I've been very concerned about the King Maple area, but at the same time, I think this would be fantastic. We have in the past been a city that has been known for supporting the arts, especially whole varieties of music acts, and then we went through COVID and that got cut back, and we're only really just starting to get to where certain venues in town are able now to more consistently have acts. So I think having Higher Ground come here into Burlington would be fantastic. We have, you know, we just had a presentation related to the once-in-a-generation infrastructure updates that we are doing that are really affecting our businesses. And our businesses need a shot in the ground, in the arm rather, because people, Higher Ground coming here, people are going to go out before the shows, so they might not even necessarily be parking in that area. We have the parking garages downtown, we have other parking downtown. It is not that far of a walk. People make this walk all the time for things like the farmers market during the summer. Depending on the show, people sometimes come to Burlington, stay in Burlington overnight, so they could utilize some of the hotel garages. I think that this would be a real big economic boon. I think for people who've gone to things like Art Hop, for example, when they were having the large concerts in the back, you know, they had to be stopped at a certain time because they were outside, but they were very successful. And in that immediate area, there's not as much residential for people to be affected. So this is such a full go for me. I mean, I think that was a lost opportunity when we couldn't get them into Burton, but if we can get them into here, we would really be looking at such tremendous economic boost that would reverberate throughout the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Are there any other councilors that wish to be recognized on item 8.3? All right, seeing none, the motion is to waive the first reading and refer to the ordinance committee. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Item 8.4 is an ordinance, CDO Champlain College bed caps, zoning amendment 2505. Director Dillard, I suppose, I know the recommended action here as listed is the same as item 8.3. I will note that we have heard from you perhaps some interest in addition to referring this to the committee, ordinance committee, that the council actually also warning this for a public hearing, which could be warned as early as our meeting on March 10th. And I'm wondering if you could just speak a bit first before we turn to the council for a potential motion as to why on this item you would potentially be asking for us to work in a more time-sensitive nature.
Sure. So Champlain College approached us last summer with interest in converting Aiken Hall, which is at the corner of, I think, Summit Maple, I think is the intersection, actually back to residences. Initially, it was a residence hall for students that was converted to office space for faculty and staff. They no longer have such a need for on-campus office space for faculty and staff. Some of those folks are working from home, and some faculty are not using their office space. And so they'd like to reconvert Aiken Hall back into housing. They would like to do so for this upcoming August semester. And so in order to get the work done in that time, they would need the zoning amendment and the ordinance to change in order for them to pursue the project on their campus at Aiken Hall.
Great. Thank you very much, Charles. Councilor Shannon, could I turn to you for a proposed motion on the item, and then we'll turn to the rest of the council for any questions and comments?
Yes, I move to waive the first reading, warn the item for a public hearing on March 10th, 2025, and refer the item to the ordinance committee for review and a report back to the full council no later than March 10th, 2025.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Seconded by Councilor Bergman. Are there any councilors that wish to be recognized on that motion? Councilor McKnight.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. It's getting late. Appreciate you staying. So this, I was just curious to hear a little bit about public process behind this, because personally I find it very difficult to keep up with the Planning Commission's agendas. They're posted like kind of late, and so this tonight was the first I'm hearing of this, and I just want to, be equipped to answer questions. So has there been a process, to get feedback on the impact this might have on neighbors? And I do also want to say props to Champlain College for taking the steps to build more on-campus housing for their students. I think that's great. We were talking about that earlier. From your memo, it sounds like they are seeing a demand from students in later years and their junior and senior years who are asking for housing, and they're stepping up to meet that demand, which is commendable. But I do think it's important that the folks who live in proximity to this building at least know that it's happening. And so just wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, sure. The Planning Commission process, is directed by statute. We did have one Planning Commission meeting in early December 3rd, I believe. It was a very straightforward conversation. The commission was unanimous in its support and warned its own public hearing for the item, which took place on January 14th. The warning process for the hearing, again, is directed by statute. We're required to post in a publication. Typically, we do 7 days, so this was posted in 7 days. It was posted on the city's website. That would have been the avenue through which people would have been made aware of this. I'm not sure. I don't believe Champlain College has conducted its own engagement process, but I would have to confirm with Nick Anderson at Champlain College if they have done anything like that. That has been the process. We did not conduct any special engagement around this amendment, but happy to take any questions more along those lines.
Okay, I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on this item? All right, seeing none, the motion is to waive the first reading, warn this item for a public hearing on March 10th, and to refer to the Ordinance Committee for a report back no later than March 10th. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Director Dillard, for being with us this evening. That takes us to the end of our deliberative agenda, and we now move to item 9, which is committee reports. Is there any councilor with a committee report? Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. The Ordinance Committee will be meeting on February 20th at 1 o'clock, and I hope that we will be talking about the 2 items that we just approved, as well as the vacant building. You'll be disappointed to hear we won't be able to talk about the cat ordinance at this meeting. That will have to wait until the Ordinance Committee can convene at a later date. I'll keep you posted. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there any other councilor with a committee report? Okay.
Well, may I just...
You may, Councilor
It really is a dog ordinance. And most of what is going to come back to this council is a dog ordinance. But before we bring that back, we do want to wrap up the cats. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Shannon. If there are no other councilors with a committee report, then that takes us to item 10, which is City Council President, council updates. And the mayor touched on this earlier in the meeting, but I just want to reaffirm that we are statutorily required to have a public hearing on all of our ballot questions, which will be the evening of this Wednesday, February 12th. My understanding, and I've reached out to the city attorney just to triple check this, is that this hearing does not require a quorum of the city council. And so that's the assumption that I am operating under here. And my understanding is that the mayor's office will, in large part, be hosting this forum and driving a presentation similar to the one that was done on January 6th. But did just want to flag and reaffirm and express my appreciation to the mayor's office for taking the lead on this one and meeting our obligation to host that forum on the 12th. So thank you, Mayor. All right. With no other business and with the bell tolling 10 p.m., I will adjourn the city council meeting at 10 p.m. Thank you very much.